Well, good evening. I'm Mayor Erica A. Stewart, and I'm here to say that all of my City Council member colleagues are here in person. Welcome to the March 4th City Council meeting, and excited to see all of you here. First, we'll kick off with Councilmember Francis leading the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. So today we get to share a few proclamations, or a couple of proclamations. And our first proclamation will be declaring March as Women's History Month. I'll be reading off the proclamation, and then I will meet our League of Women Voter friends down at the podium where they'll say a few words. So first and foremost, whereas Women's History Month was first recognized in the United States in 1987, when the National Women's History Project petitioned Congress for its creation, because they noted that women were represented in less than 3% of history texts. San Luis Obispo women have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation, our state, and the city of San Luis Obispo in countless ways, recorded and unrecorded. Local women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of life in our community by comprising, I can't speak today, I'm so sorry. In every sphere of life in our community by comprising a significant portion of the labor force, working inside and outside of the home. Local women have played and continue to play essential roles in our local volunteer and nonprofit sector, starting and growing organizations like the League of Women Voters, the Monday Club, the Women's Legacy Fund, and Race Matters SLO. Local women have served our country courageously in the military and law enforcement and have made major contributions to American history, teaching, and literature. Local women have been leaders in positions of government and business, and in increasing numbers are rising to prominent positions. Local women have been leaders in progressive social change, in securing the rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, and in civil rights and social justice movements that help create a more fair and just society for all. Whereas fewer than 1/3 of California legislators are women, and California ranks 28th nationally for the percentage of women serving in the elected office. Now therefore I, Erica A. Stewart, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council and in collaboration with the League of Women Voters, San Luis Obispo County, proclaim March as Women's History Month.
Honorable Mayor Stewart, San Luis Obispo City Council members, my name is Kim Gravel. I am a board member. I'm also the lead for our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I'm joined here today with Ann Havlick, our co-president, as well as Ed Cabrera, our vice president. On behalf of the members of the League, thank you for the honor of receiving your proclamation and in recognition of Women's History Month. This year's theme is Women's History Month is moving forward, women educating and inspiring generations. And I cannot think of something more appropriate for the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nationwide nonpartisan and grassroots political organization that was formed as a direct result of the women's suffrage movement. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy through education and civic engagement. Our members register voters, organize candidate and ballot measure forums for the public, study public policy issues, and advocate for some issues and volunteers at voter polls. The League just celebrated our 105th anniversary this past Valentine's Day. And our local league here in San Luis Obispo County is 57 years in running. Again, I want to thank you and appreciate this opportunity to educate on the League of Women Voters and really appreciate this honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, next we have another proclamation, and I get to share this with Clint Pierce. And if you'd like to come down in a few moments, let me know. So we have, whereas travel and tourism, let me rewind. Mid-weekend vacation capital of the world. That is San Luis Obispo. So whereas travel and tourism are essential drivers of economic vitality, fostering local business growth and cultural enrichment in communities. In 2008, San Luis Obispo established a tourism business improvement district, allowing the hotel industry to raise funds solely dedicated to tourism marketing to attract visitors to SLO. The appointed TBID board members, in collaboration with city staff and agency partners, guide the marketing efforts for the public-facing destination brand Visit San Luis Obispo, driving overnight visitation with the mission of fostering a welcoming community, supporting a vibrant economy, and reinvesting in the city and its residents. In 2022, Visit San Luis Obispo launched the Midweekend campaign to encourage midweek stays and showcase the city's vibrant culture and attractions Sunday through Thursday. This initiative has set a benchmark in the travel industry, inspiring other destinations to promote midweek travel as a strategy for sustainable tourism and enhanced visitor experiences. Studies show that taking time off during the work week improves mental health by reducing stress, enhancing productivity, and fostering overall well-being. Sustainable tourism practices include midweek travel, help alleviate the carbon impact of travel by distributing visitor impact more evenly, reducing congestion, and supporting local businesses beyond peak weekend surges. Midweek travel offers more affordable accommodation rates, dining specials, and exclusive experiences, including the Thursday night downtown farmers market, world-class wine tastings, cultural events, and so much more, ensuring visitors live the slow life. So now, therefore, I, Erica A. Stewart, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby proclaim San Luis Obispo as the mid-weekend vacation capital of the world. Yes, I have that power. and commend Visit San Luis Obispo's efforts to encourage residents and visitors alike to embrace the benefits of midweek travel for our collective economic, personal, and environmental well-being. Thank you.
Can I get a picture of both of you?
Sorry.
Lovely, thank you.
Well, we're very excited. Thank you, Mayor Stewart and council members. My name is Clint Pierce, and I'm the vice chair of SLO's TBID, and I'm honored to accept this proclamation on behalf of Visit San Luis Obispo. Us locals have long known that every day feels like Saturday in SLO. And we're grateful to now officially claim the mid-weekend and share all the benefits of midweek travel and experiences in San Luis with the world. Visit San Luis Obispo looks forward to continuing our important work of driving overnight stays to our lodging properties, sharing the unique stories of SLO, and continuing to increase tourism's positive impact for our local economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, next we get to hear from our city manager to share a brief report about things going on in the city.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and City Council. We have just a few slides to go over this evening. I know I say that oftentimes, but this time there really are only a few. First, we wanted to note St. Patrick's Day that is coming up in a couple of weeks. This is our last meeting before St. Patrick's Day will be held, and so we wanted to remind everybody that our safety enhancement zones are going into effect March 7th at midnight through March 10th at 7 a.m. and then we'll resume March 14th at midnight, and then run through March 18th at 7 a.m. as well. As we've discussed in previous years past, these safety enhancement zones are intended to increase fines for illegal activities that really create nuisance and other types of safety concerns. And so that's really done in response to the increased activity we see around St. Patrick's Day. Of course, the large street party that we've seen occur over the last few years is a huge concern and issue, and we've talked about that a few times here at council, and really wanted to make sure everybody is aware. There's been a lot of communication has really ramped up in close coordination between our police department, our communications team here, and then with Cal Poly's communications team as well. Our mayor and Mayor Stewart and President Armstrong joined in a joint press conference on Friday. A joint op-ed was published by our police chief and the Cal Poly's interim police chief as well, really highlighting again the concerns around safety and the desires to end the illegal street party as well as the other kind of ancillary illegal activities. You probably, hopefully you've heard the list of things that are identified up here on the list here. Our officers and staff have been out making it very clear that we're taking a zero tolerance approach to enforcement. That has been in effect in a number of ways throughout the last few weekends, and it will certainly continue all the way through St. Patrick's Day. We also wanted to highlight for everyone that Cal Poly is hosting an alternative event on campus very early in the morning on the 15th from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. with the goal and hope that it will deter folks from swarming our streets and taking them over and conducting illegal activity, and instead really participate in something alternative that is more controllable and safer for everyone involved. So I know they'll be pushing out a lot of information. I'm sure people on campus and students are aware that this is occurring. We really encourage people to look there for any celebrations they might want to do in the wee hours on Saturday morning for whatever reason. That is a much better option than what may have otherwise occurred in the past. And again, our goal here is to, over time, see the illegal street party end. We have a significant amount of resources who will be being called in to aid us in that process. So you'll be seeing a lot of law enforcement, both in our community on the street and then on Cal Poly's campus. They've taken a lot of steps to try to clamp down on any of the behavior that occurred there or could be occurring in the future. So we just wanted to highlight all of this. We know it's coming up very soon, and wanted to again reiterate for the community that we've taken a number of different steps, both internally and in close coordination with Cal Poly, who has activated their emergency operations center to plan for this. Lots of resources and plans being put in place and rolled out in order to address this and get a handle on it. So thank you, and feel free to, if you have any questions, we're here to answer those, and we'll be looking forward to seeing nothing happen, actually. That's the goal. Next, we wanted to alert everyone and make sure people are aware that you may see a large yellow truck driving around town. It is intended to be here, and it's our essentially a borrowed replacement truck for our truck one, our fire truck that is out for repairs. So if you see a big yellow truck that says 5 Cities Fire Authority, it is intended to be here. If it shows up, I'm sure you'll be happy that it shows up. At least that's how I would believe I would respond. Just any truck will do, but we're really appreciative of the help and the service, but also wanted to make sure folks were aware that if you see this on the street, it really is there to serve our community, and that's to enable us to make repairs on our truck one. We also have another truck that's out for service as well. We anticipate that being back within a couple of months, and we'll continue to have our other units on service, and just wanted to make people aware that not only we're taking care of our trucks that are out on repair, but we've been provided this alternative in the meantime. Next, we wanted to make sure folks were aware of some new information and resources that we have available. Our Roll and Stroll Education Hub has been published and is available online at slowcity.org/rollstroll. There's a QR code up on the screen as well. It will serve as a one-stop resource for biking and walking in San Luis Obispo. If anybody has questions about how do you use these new bike lanes or bike infrastructure? What are they? How are they intended to be used by either cyclists or drivers who might have questions about how to interact with them as well? A lot of this information includes safety information, instructional videos, guidance on navigating our new facilities, and links to some in-person educational opportunities as well for everyone. Hopefully you'll start to see this poster out in the community as well. It's going to be, you'll see it on some of our buses and other places around downtown. And our staff will be working on publishing more resources as time goes by. So we're working on a couple of additional bicycle education videos. And then we'll be collaborating with County Public Health to put banners promoting walk and bike safety downtown on Marsh Street and Monterey, and also on LOVR across from Laguna Middle School. So wanted to make sure everybody's aware we have this information available. And then finally, we just are highlighting, as we do during each city manager report, what's coming up at our next meeting. We've been on quite a course of holding weekly meetings, and we'll be back to normal for at least for March. So our next regular meeting is on March 18th. We'll be taking care of a number of consent agenda items, which are listed here. And then on to the next screen, we've got a few more that we'll be addressing as well. And then finally, our major public hearing and business items are related to our solid waste rates. So we have a couple of ordinances that are being introduced. One is to propose adoption of a new solid waste recycling and organics franchise agreement. Another is to amend the method that we use to collect delinquent solid waste accounts, and that would be an ordinance amendment that we're proposing there. And then finally, to conduct a hearing and propose adoption of new solid waste rates. So if anybody has any questions about those rates and what's involved, our utilities division or department has a lot of information available on their website about what we've discussed there. And then finally, we'll be having a conversation about a proposed striping modifications on Tank Farm Road. We want to make sure that everyone's clear on what we're contemplating. It would be these changes would be included within our paving project, larger paving project for 2025 that would be presented on a future consent agenda. And so because this is a change to the striping, we wanted to make sure everybody's aware and has an opportunity to give us feedback and direction. So that's our next meeting on March 18th. And with that, that's it for my slides.
Thank you so much. Excited to see the roll and stroll education. Hoping to see those QR codes in a few more places so that people can see those beyond just online, and social media. Any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, we'll move forward to public comment for items not on the agenda. So if you're here for an item on the agenda, you're good, keep waiting. But if you have something you'd like to share with us that's not on the agenda, this is your time. There is a slip of paper in front of Mr. Herman right there, blue, green, and pink. If you wish to add something in, you haven't had a chance to submit your slip yet. City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Yes, on this item, we have one speaker, Cameron Shingler.
Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you very much for having me speak again. I just want to briefly cover some things I did not touch upon last week to fill up the information. I just moved here about a few weeks ago. I am currently a homeless person, and I have noticed some issues with the local homeless shelter 40 Prado that I would like to just address in hopes of improving some nature concerning this, the only one here in this town. I've been around the Pacific coast of different shelters like Ukiah and Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz. I just wanted to note real quickly that it might help if there was a concern for safety, because there are a number of people who walk into that shelter without being addressed of weapons such as knives and tasers. And this is a shelter that also accompanies families. Like, there are children who go to the shelter. And it's very concerning because not only are weapons allowed on this premises after a standard intake, as far as I see, but there's also a manner of, fights that break out, unfortunately, and profanity that children don't need to be witness to. It's just something that I would like to, maybe if there's any baby steps to be made, I would personally suggest that there is a shelter in Santa Rosa that right before the actual meal, like dinner, they have an hour-long sermon from a preacher or somebody who just wanted to speak on a moral subject as opposed to a religious subject, just something to help build enthusiasm and self-discipline for people who are in this homeless predicament. It would really help them. And that's something that's really lacking at this shelter, I'm afraid. And also checking for weapons at the entrance. That's something at Ukiah, a town up in Northern California, they have, that's very standard for them. And to try, 20 seconds left. Yeah, that's really what the important things I wanted to mention. Besides that, I really love this town. Very safe and beautiful town overall. I appreciate being here, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just in time before the very loud beep. Thank you so much. So next we have our consent agenda, which are items considered to not be very controversial. So with my colleagues, do you have anything you'd like to pull from the consent agenda? Okay. Do we have any comments?
No, we do not.
All right. So with that, I just want to say I'm very thankful to our team here and to the county for all of the work you're doing on the Welcome Home Village and making this a reality. So thank you very much. And with that, do I hear a motion? Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I would like to move to approve the consent.
Thank you. And Councilmember Boswell.
Second.
Thank you. Could we have roll call?
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Boswell?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shorsman?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, and the consent items pass 5-0. Thank you so much. All right, so the next thing we have is probably why a lot of you are here, is we have the review of an appeal of the Planning Commission decision to approve the Waterman Village project at 466 Adana Street. I would like to ask each council member, starting with Vice Mayor Shorsman, if you have had any ex parte disclosures of contact with anyone who has provided information to council members not on the record, so that this information may be used as part of the decision-making process.
Yes, I received a tour and briefing of the property from SmartShare.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
I also toured the property with SmartShare.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Francis.
I also toured the property with SmartShare.
Great. Councilmember Boswell.
And I also toured the property with SmartShare. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I also toured the property about 2 years ago, so just want to make sure that I'm on the record as well. Thank you, and with that, we will welcome Teresa McClish and David Amini to provide the report.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and members of the council. We're happy to be here this evening to present this item tonight, which is an appeal of the Waterman Village project at 466 Dana Street. Make sure we're lined up there. The subject of tonight's presentation is a review of the appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to approve the Waterman Village project, which proposes 20 low to very low income homes and rehabilitation of the historic Rosa Bertrand adobe. Staff's recommendation tonight is to adopt the draft resolution denying the appeal and upholding the Planning Commission's approval of the project. Council has the final authority tonight to approve or deny the project's planning, land use entitlements. As this is a de novo hearing, Council has the authority to modify or add any conditions of approval as appropriate to address the issues brought up by the appeal. Council's determination tonight regarding the appeal for land use entitlement is final. Property lease negotiations are not included in tonight's decision, as that requires separate action and would be considered at a future date after land use entitlements are approved. I'll now hand it over to David Amini, Housing Coordinator for the City, to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Teresa. The applicant, SmartShare Housing Solutions, is proposing the construction of 20 very low to low income affordable homes ranging in size from 220 to 264 square feet. The project also includes a request for a concession pursuant to California State Density Bonus Law for a reduction in parking requirements. The project proposes to rehabilitate the master list historic Rosa Bertrand adobe, which includes demolition of portions of the building at the rear of the structure. The project also includes the removal of 12 trees with a compensatory planting plan, and a mitigated negative declaration of environmental impact has been prepared to assess the potential environmental effects of the project pursuant to CEQA. Here's a context map showing the project site outlined in yellow. The neighboring uses of the site are multifamily residential to the southwest, Stenner Creek to the northwest, the Oddfellows Hall located to the north, and then Dana Street on the southeast side. Here's a site plan showing the orientation of the new units clustered around the adobe, and Dana Street is located on the right side of the plan. The City of San Luis Obispo has owned the master list Rosa Bertrand adobe property since 1989, after acquiring the property as a life estate gift from Miss Mary Gail Black. The property was given through a grant deed, which outlines both requests and restrictions regarding the city's ownership of the property. It is important to note that the grant deed makes a request that the adobe and 2 adjoining wings that make up the old house and the trees on that property be maintained by the city for park or recreational purposes. The city provides basic maintenance and upkeep to the property. This includes bi-monthly grounds maintenance, biannual gutter cleaning, an annual inspection of the adobe and grounds, as well as periodic painting and roofing capital projects. All other maintenance is completed on an as-needed basis. The adobe is vacant and at risk of ongoing deterioration and threats to its long-term preservation. On March 6, 2020, at the direction of the City Council, staff issued a request for interest document seeking community partners to help the city rehabilitate and reuse the Rosa Bertrand adobe in accordance with program guidance found in the conservation and open space element of the general plan. As a result of this process, in September of 2021, Council approved an exclusive negotiating agreement with SmartShare Housing Solutions and the Peace Project that set forth a shared vision between those 2 organizations for the Waterman Peace Village. City Council further approved an amended and restated exclusive negotiating agreement in February of 2024 with SmartShare Housing Solutions only, and the current project scope entails rehabilitation and reuse of the adobe with the construction of 20 low to very low income housing units on the site. The exclusive negotiating agreement requires SmartShare to achieve project environmental and planning approvals and demonstrate full project financing before the lease is executed with the city and construction can begin. Staff will seek council direction regarding the specifics of the lease agreement, which will be approved by council at a public hearing. The Waterman Village project was subject to a moderate level of development review to achieve planning entitlements per the city's municipal code. This is a director level approval process with a public hearing before the Architectural Review Commission. The exclusive negotiating agreement additionally required the Cultural Heritage Committee to review the project. Due to the property's position on the city's master list of historic properties, as well as the mitigated negative declaration of environmental impact, city ownership of the property, and high public interest in the project, the director referred the project to the Planning Commission for final entitlement approval. The Cultural Heritage Committee held a public hearing on October 28, 2024. The project was found to be consistent with the Historic Preservation Ordinance, with recommendations regarding the following: evaluation of the period of significance in the Historic Resources Report for the potential that the historic period of significance extends to 1989, evaluation of the potential that the site is believed to have been the original location of Mission San Luis Obispo from 1775 to 1788, and the inclusion of requirements for construction staff training for the possibility that burial sites and artifacts may be encountered from the Mission era. Additionally, there's direction for the inclusion of historical signage that reflects all periods of significance and the cultural narrative of the site. The committee voted 4-3 in favor of the project. The Architectural Review Commission held a public hearing on November 18, 2024. The project was found to be consistent with the community design guidelines, with recommendations regarding the following: prioritization of the Adobe remodel before the new construction, the recommendation that the exterior color of the new buildings be gray or a darker color than the Adobe, the direction to add on-site amenities such as benches, tables, and chairs to provide more resident community spaces, and direction to include more short-term bike parking for visitors to the property. At the December 11th Planning Commission hearing, after reviewing recommendations from the Cultural Heritage Committee and the Architectural Review Commission, as well as staff's presentation and community feedback, the Planning Commission moved unanimously to adopt the draft resolution regarding the project, which provided for the following: the adoption of the initial study and mitigated negative declaration of environmental impact prepared pursuant to CEQA, the determination that the city's action on the subject property to authorize or construct buildings or structures for the purposes of developing affordable housing is consistent with the general plan, and the approval of the proposed construction of 20 low and very low income residential units with a parking reduction pursuant to state density bonus law, rehabilitation of the historic Adobe, and the associated removal of 12 trees based on findings and subject to the conditions of approval. The Planning Commission made minor changes to the condition of approval for the project to add the possibility of utility submetering and requiring e-bike charging access at the long-term bicycle parking spaces. On December 20th, 2024, Stephen Barish, on behalf of the San Luis Obispo Property and Business Owners Association, timely filed an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision. The appeal claims that restrictive covenants in the grant deed require the property to be used solely as a park for recreational uses only. Furthermore, the appeal claims that any uses outside of a park or recreational uses exceed the authorized powers of the city. And lastly, the appeal claims that the project's proposed use violates the covenants or conditions of the grant deed and City Council resolution of acceptance. Staff, as well as the City Attorney's Office, have reviewed the appeal and made the following findings. The grant deed from Ms. Mary Gail Black to the city makes the request that the adobe and trees be maintained by the city for park and recreational purposes. This request is different from the 7 enforceable covenants of the deed, which relate to providing elements such as providing basic maintenance to the property and structures, providing water and sewer services to the site, as well as paying the property taxes. The project does honor Ms. Black's request in the following ways. Project restores the adobe and preserves it for future generations. Project preserves the park-like setting of the property and retains a majority of the mature trees on site. Project provides signage explaining the historical significance of the site, as well as incorporating site elements that provide an opportunity for public engagement and interaction. The City Attorney's Office has reviewed the case provided by the appellant, along with further cases provided by appellant's counsel in agenda correspondence. The City Attorney's Office has concluded that these cases are not applicable to the facts of the present appeal. In the case of Wellwood versus Palm Springs, the grant deed in that case contained express agreements and conditions that conflicted with a development agreement for the project. The Planning Commission's approval of the proposed project is not an attempt to divert the use of the property from its dedicated purposes, and is therefore not an ultra-virus act meaning an unauthorized act or an act beyond the city's authority, as the appellant contends. In the case of Aller versus the Berkeley Hall School Foundation, the grant deed in that case contained express material restrictions in the deed that the lot and all buildings shall be used exclusively for private residences. The grant deed from Ms. Mary Gail Black to the city does not contain express material restrictions regarding a park, and even the request in the deed speaks to the adobe and trees specifically. In the case of the County of Solano versus Handlery, the county in the case claimed that their property was free of express restrictions found in the grant deed. Here, the city has complied with all express covenants and conditions and is working with the applicant to honor requests specific to the adobe and trees on the property to the extent practically feasible. Based on review of the grant deed, it is clear that the grant deed makes a request that the property be used for park or recreational purposes. The proposed project meets the intent of this request, and it is not an exclusive restriction placed on the property. The city attorney's office has reviewed the case provided by the appellant, along with further cases provided by the appellant's counsel. The city attorney's office has concluded that these cases are not applicable to the facts of the present appeal. Staff and the city's attorney's office recommend that council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the project. If the city council denies the appeal and the land use entitlement is secured, the applicant will need to meet several conditions prior to lease negotiations for the property, including demonstration of financial milestones and other obligations of the exclusive negotiating agreement. The milestones include but are not limited to the following: seeking out an accurate cost estimate and demonstrating a financing plan showing that the applicant has 50% of the project costs in cash or other demonstrable financing commitments, as well as a plan to achieve the remaining 50%. The final lease agreement will be approved by City Council at a public hearing. If the lease is approved, the applicant will have to secure building permits, demonstrate that they hold 100% of the project budget, as well as an operating reserve, and satisfy all other conditions of the lease, exclusive negotiating agreement, conditions of approval, and approved environmental documents prior to beginning construction. Again, tonight's recommendation is for council to adopt the draft resolution denying the appeal and upholding the Planning Commission's approval of the project. I'll mention again, since this is a de novo hearing, council could choose to amend the conditions of approval for the project if necessary. Otherwise, council can provide input during the lease negotiations phase of the project with the applicant. That concludes my presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the clear overview. Do any of my colleagues have questions? Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm curious if there were attempts to preserve or utilize the adobe prior to the 2020 RFI.
I don't believe that there were any requests. I think the RFI was the main council attempt to provide some kind of reuse of this property.
Okay. And just to clarify, I think you mentioned that there would be room for talking about any potential lease later, but would it be possible, since it seems like the primary concern here is access to the restored adobe, is it possible to include in that lease agreement some public access to the restored adobe, similar to weekly visitation or periodic events like at the Jack House type thing?
Yeah, that could definitely be considered. The lease negotiations process during the real property negotiations phase, the city council has the right to include any conditions or elements that they want to see in the final use of the property.
Thank you. That's it for now.
Mr. Hill, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add to your question, Councilmember Francis, regarding prior efforts regarding adobes. The city did enjoy a relationship with the Friends of Las Casas de Adobes. However, that was over 20 years ago. They did a lot of planning work surrounding all 4 of the city's adobes, and some minor maintenance and preliminary restoration work, but not an effort like this at all.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Yes. My question is about the Cultural Heritage Committee's vote on the project, and you noted that it was a 4-3 vote, and I'm just wondering if you have any sort of summary information about what the 3 that voted against, what were their issues with the project?
I don't have that information readily available. However, I believe one of the members of the committee is in the audience tonight and could provide further information to that effect.
Okay. And then my other question is, it looked like the CHC, the ARC, and the Planning Commission all made recommendations or changes to the specifications in the in their decisions. Has SmartShare agreed to implement, or are all of those going into the development agreement, or how do we ensure that those recommendations are instituted if the project goes forward?
So some of the design recommendations that were recommended by the Architectural Review Commission, such as changing the color of the new construction units and incorporating site furnishings to promote public interaction, were included and updated in the project design before it was presented to the Planning Commission. Other recommendations regarding items such as project sequencing, those could be incorporated into the lease negotiations phase of the project.
Okay, and then my last question I think is applicable to you, and sorry I didn't prep you in advance for this, so if you don't know the answer offhand, that's completely fine. We can maybe find it later, but the units, if the project goes forward, are for low and very low income, if I'm correct about that. Can you explain what that means for the folks at home here?
Sure. So low income, according to definitions provided by the state that are implemented by the city, is anyone making 60% of the area median income or below. I don't remember what the amount of an annual salary per year is, but I would estimate it's around the $50,000 to $60,000 range. So, and very low is, I believe, 40% of the area median income. So if you can imagine that salary range or below.
And that's for an individual, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if there's a way to answer that question about the discussion at the CHC meeting, I'd love to hear that information. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, did you have some information on this?
Thank you. I'm hoping we have a few members of staff that I think may be able to help fill in, perhaps. Okay. We'll be able to, you'll probably see a staff member float up to the podium when we have that ready. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions about this project, but they have more to do with the actual operation and terms that would go into when we're considering the lease, if we get that far. So, but right now I have a question about if the nonprofit is unable to meet the benchmarks, what happens to the project at that point?
So the exclusive negotiating agreement that was signed between the city and SmartShare is a 2-year agreement. Right now, we're almost completing the first year of the project. So if the SmartShare cannot demonstrate the financial ability or the ability to complete the project, the exclusive negotiating agreement would expire. And so that would be the conclusion.
Unless amended by the city council.
Right.
And then what would happen?
I'm going to have the city attorney pipe in real quick.
I was just going to add that there is a land use entitlement, and land use entitlements do run with the land. So whether or not this particular partner was involved in implementing a project, the entitlement that the approval of this use of the property would continue to run with the land unless altered in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate also staff's agenda correspondence in this as well. There were some of those questions answered that I had already regarding the SmartShare and then the Adobe restoration, so thank you so much. Well, Vice Mayor.
Sorry, I have one more follow-up based on Councilmember Marks's question, just to clarify. So does that mean that if the entitlement moves forward with the property, does that mean that technically any other future use or owner of the property, if it wasn't us, would need to follow the same sort of requirements of what we're looking at today?
So the city would continue to own the property, and the council would have full discretion in the future as to whether and how and with whom to dispose of the property or, otherwise encumber or approve uses. But this particular use, having been considered through the city's process, would be transferable to another partner in the event that that SmartShare decided that it couldn't go forward. The council could, but that would all be subject to absolute council discretion, obviously. But yes, you wouldn't have to start over if someone wished to do the same type of project. This land use has already been approved, and if the council does not overturn the approval through granting the appeal, then that would remain in place on the property.
But as long as the council owned the property, then we would have the ability to change those uses if we chose to. But it's just that this had been approved already, so it would make it easier to do something similar.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before we head to the applicant presentation, I just want to remind people that if you would like to speak on this comment, this is your last chance to be able to put in a speaker slip. We have the 3 different colors, pink, green, and blue, not just because they are pretty, but they are the time. So if you'd like to bring in 1 minute of public comment, or 2 minutes, or 3 minutes, those that speak for 1 minute will be called on first, then those who speak on 2 minutes get called on second, and then the 3 minutes. At this point, we already have 9 speakers, so we're getting close to maximum. All right, and with that, we will, I believe Director Tway has an answer for us.
I do, thank you. Sorry for my hesitation. I wanted to talk to Brian Lavelle, who was very aware. My fault. So there were concerns from several of the CHC members about the density of the site and the number of units affecting the spatial relationship on the site. And as we recall, potentially some concerns about the height of the new units in relationship to the adobe. But ultimately it was a 3-4 vote, but that is what was expressed by several of the CHC members when they reviewed the project.
Thank you very much. On that note, we'll change chairs for a little bit.
Okay, so the appellant has put in a speaker card. Steve Barish, I don't have a speaker card indicating the applicant, but they would also have 10 minutes after Mr. Barish. Mr. Barish, if you would like to reserve any of your time for rebuttal, please let me know, but you will only get a total of 10 minutes. So if you want to reserve any of your time for rebuttal, you will only get a total of 10 minutes. So keep that in mind. We'll show on the screen the time.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. It's a pleasure to be in front of you. I have 2 questions for the city attorney, and I really think these need to be answered first. Are we still operating as a charter city, is the first question. And if so, is the September 2011 revisions to the city charter, the most recent revisions? This is an important question.
Madam Mayor,
City
did you want
Attorney.
me to respond?
Yes, please.
We certainly are still operating as a charter city. I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to go back and look at the most recent revisions to the charter.
That sounds logical, thank you.
If the council or the appellant wanted to point to a specific provision, I can certainly look into that.
Thank you.
The reason I asked the question is not to be clever or deceiving, it's just I assume that the current city charter is the basis by which the city conducts its business. It's really important because there's a section in here about proclamations and rescinding proclamations that is crystal clear in the city charter. And it says once a proclamation is made, it either has to be rescinded or it stands. The city council passed a very clear resolution. And the grant deed that governs the use of this property says, and I just want to read a simple section of that. The Waterman adobe, as it is sometimes referred to, the adobe and the two adjoining wings that make up the old house and the trees on the property be maintained by the city for park or recreational purposes, period. And that Mildred Waterman's name be included in any name that the city gives to this park area. And then it goes on to describe specifically the boundaries of the area in question. Okay, it's crystal clear. It doesn't say what other uses could be on the property. It just says that the property shall be used as a park and for recreational purposes. Simple, stupid, to me anyway. And I am reading from the James Papp, who's an architectural historian, prepared a report for Smart Share Housing dated September 2022. And it said basically that the adobe with structures around it would render it unqualified for California Historic Landmark designation for its surviving original designated setting. The property would present a manufactured housing project with visible historic house and old trees, and the adobe would become ineligible for most aspects of its current master listing. No practical mitigation for the housing complex would prevent significant impact. Alternatives, including siting the housing complex on city land that is not historic landscape, does not include historic building, was not donated and accepted for recreation and is in a flood zone. So this report is about 98 pages, very, very extensive. It went into the history of the people who lived here, et cetera. And that was his conclusion. Now, I wear two hats, not any hat tonight, because my vision is going, but I wear a hat as the landowner to the property to the west that I think is referred to as the Carriage House. I'm a past president of the San Luis Obispo Property Owners Association, the current treasurer, and I was also co-chair of the Housing Update in 1995 that designated what low, moderate housing entailed. And it was adopted by the city and incorporated into the city's housing element. So I guess I should have worn more hats. It is crystal clear in the grant deed that this is not a sissy request. This is a mandate from the donor of the property to the city to use this property for specific reasons. This was City Resolution 6512, 1988 series. It was signed by two past mayors. Mr. Doonan was one of them, and Mr. Dave Romero. So two city mayors signed onto this, and the actual resolution was drafted by the Parks Director, ironically, who was very much aware of the uses of the property. And they had a budget that was defined in that adoption of the resolution, and that budget was laid out very, very clearly. Now, I gotta pose a question, because I just don't think things are easy to understand sometimes. And the question is, what would any person who bequeathed property to a municipal government agency, what could they do differently to ensure that this property would be used for a specific intended purposes before they died? And I believe Ms. Waterman died in late '89, and she had attorneys, and the attorneys spent 9 months hammering out an agreement with the city so that this property would be used as a park and for recreational uses. It did not preclude any other specific uses, but it did not identify those uses either. Okay, so it's crystal clear that her intent was that this be made as a public park. And the definition of a park in 1988 isn't that much different of a park in 2025. A park is a park. It's used for public use. It's not used for private use. If these cottage units were built, I'm not sure some of the residents would enjoy having coffee with public visitors after hours on this property. It's as simple as that. So I'm not sure what the donor of the property to the city could have done differently. This was not just a pansy request. This was a mandate by her as a condition. And the city spent money redoing the roof, landscaping the front of the building and the back of the building, cleaning debris out from the adjacent creeks. They spent real money demonstrating their willingness to maintain this property in perpetuity. Okay, so it's crystal clear what their intent was. I just don't see how any donor of property could have done anything differently with their legal counsel and their attorneys. It wasn't just a wish list item, it was a mandate. I'd like to turn some of my time over to, since I have 2 minutes, to Sarah Rizzo, who's done a legal analysis of the history of this from an attorney's point of view, and have him talk about what he found out. Thank you. And I'm available for questions after hours.
Past the 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Gotcha.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Rizzo has already put in a speaker card. I don't know if it's in addition or instead of.
Were you wanting to speak, Mr. Rizzo, at this moment?
I can speak now, but I also filled out a slip for 3 minutes. So I'm donating part of my time.
Well, it doesn't work that way. But you can have your 3 minutes for public comment, and then that way reserves 2 minutes and 13 seconds for any questions for Mr. Barish. Does it sound good?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So but public comment starts with the 1 minute. So hang on 1 minute, please. All right, so.
I'm sorry, Mayor, one more time.
Yes.
We need to know if the applicant would like to do their presentation first.
Yes. Thank you. Do we want to have any questions for the appellant first? Yes. Okay, great. At this time, do you have any questions to my colleagues, to Mr. Barish, before we move forward? Okay, great. You had 2 minutes, so I wanted to make sure. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis, and happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Gosh, I know how to spend a birthday. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Ty Green. It is my birthday. I'm here representing Smart Share. And I wanted to answer Mr. Barish's questions, as he asked 2 or 3 times, what could a donor do to make sure that the city follows through on what their intent is? And it's very simple. It's in every case they cited in the letter from Mr. Rizzo, it was expressly stated that this is what this property will be used for and no other use. It was a covenant. It wasn't a request. And as Mr. Barish said, there were lawyers working on this for 9 months. Both sides had lawyers. You had Judge Piquet at the time was the city attorney. I know Judge Piquet well. And I guarantee that the grant deed that says with the request was put in there by Judge Piquet, so we didn't end up in the situation we're talking about now. Because remember, this was a gift to the city. But the city also expended funds on this and has expended funds since 1989 in maintaining it. So I'm going to turn this over to Ann Wyatt in a minute because she has a lot more to offer than I do. But I think I don't want to say crystal clear, but it's crystal clear the other way. When you read the deed, it says with the request. And then it continues later on in the deed to have real conditions that have nothing to do with the park or rec use of the property. And as to the resolution, what the city council did in the resolution was accept the grant deed. So the language of the grant deed controls the resolution. So with that, I'll turn this over to Ann Wyatt, and thank you. Any questions I'd be happy to answer, but I'll let Ann have the rest of the time.
Actually, I do have one question for you. There was a mention in the footnote around the transient, and I believe that this is not for transient dwellings. Can you just expand on that?
Yeah, my understanding, and Ms. Wyatt will be able to explain it better than I can, but because when she came into my office, I kind of was under the impression it was going to be more of a people coming through all the time. But Ms. Wyatt will tell you that this is going to be people that come in and stay there permanently. I think the way she put it is they'll be carried out after they live there for a while. So she knows better than I do, but that is my understanding of the project.
Thank you, Ms. Wyatt.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. Thank you for your public service. I'm Ann Wyatt, Executive Director of Smart Share Housing Solutions. And we're just shy of 5 years into a transparent public-private partnership between the city and SmartShare and hundreds of community member, volunteers, and donors to bring to life a closed-off, boarded-up, 35-year vacant city-owned property. Thank you. Next slide. I'll switch to the next slide, please. Thanks, David. I want to thank the volunteers, donors, supporters that are here tonight. I hope you'll stand now and show your support or wave your cards. This isn't a one-off couple of people project. This is really a community-based project. I'm thrilled to bring it here tonight and to request that you uphold the Planning Commission approval and deny the appeal before you. Next slide, please. Flip forward. We'll skip through these. I think people have seen them. I just want to mention there have been some expressed concerns and mischaracterizations along the way here, some of regarding what you asked earlier. Just briefly, as far as parking has been a major issue here, and transportation costs hit lower income residents much harder than others. AAA estimates that the cost of car ownership now is upwards of $12,000 a year. I want to point out that that may be more than rent for a place like this. It hits lower income households hugely. And people interested in simple living in micro homes like this downtown are also likely to be more interested in car-free living. So these notions of parking and car-free living won't be relevant to every resident, but a lot. It's also important to note that since opponents have brought up parking concerns along the way, and you as council members, it's worth noting that Mr. Barish has had the luxury to benefit from free parking for his adjacent tenants on the city property for a long time. And it's worth kind of wondering if part of his opposition doesn't have something to do with the loss of the free parking that he's enjoyed for a long time, that he won't have if there's a new project next door. As far as property values, it's also another one that I think's come up. It hasn't come up explicitly, but because we're being challenged here, the appeal is signed by the SLO Property and Business Owners Association. And most of the people, a lot of them we've heard from, are not residents on the block, but property owners. I think there's a feeling of threat to property values, but the studies that we have, including one from the National Association of Realtors, really show that property values go up, if anything, in local neighborhoods with well-built, affordable housing. And so we don't see a diminishing of property values in the record. So also, opponents have mischaracterized these small cottages. They're one-story permanent homes, not more than 19 feet high, and they've been mischaracterized as high-density and transient housing and trailers. It's permanent housing proposed, relatively low density compared to the 3-story building across Dana Street, and homes won't be on wheels. They may actually be built on site, not even factory built. That's still TBD. And so the crux of this appeal, brought by the SLO Property and Business Owners Association, a group of people that don't reside on Dana Street but own rental buildings there, such as Mr. Barish, is that the proposed Waterman Village does not meet the request and conditions of Ms. Black's generous gift. You've heard from attorneys, and I expect they'll speak more, so I'll leave that alone. But also, you have in the record an appeal from the so-called descendants of Mary Gail Black. And I think that's also a really interesting one here as part of the case, because I'm really curious how a childless woman, Ms. Black, can even have descendants. So as part of the record, I maybe some family members will help clarify that, kind of how they can be asking for a property back when descendants may be hard to come by without children. It's like saying I'm a childless woman and maybe I have some descendants roaming around that I don't even know about. So that's a little tricky. And so beyond the existence of descendants and the legalese, at the heart of this, Smart Share Housing has entered into this project and proceeded in partnership with the city with the full intent to meet all of Ms. Black's requests. The Waterman Village, originally conceived as the Mildred Waterman Village Park, meets all requests and conditions in the deed. In initial meetings with the neighbors, they told us that they didn't favor a public park area with a high level of public access because that may encourage, perpetuate transient activity. So our team downplayed park offerings as part of this project on the request of the neighbors that told us that wasn't a priority for them and actually wasn't something they wanted to see. Now, mostly non-resident project opponents claim lack of public access and that the park is problematic. SmartShare is happy to work with city park staff and you to find reasonable public access to the outdoor park area and the Adobe portion of the park, balancing what neighbors want and the donor intent. That has always been our plan. How that intersects has been and remains a bit unclear to us, frankly, and we're happy to take your direction there. Again, the request of Ms. Black is in these items from the deed, and Waterman Village is in compliance with all of them. If we look at those that we have up, Adobe Rehab, indeed, the historic portions of the Adobe will be rehabilitated and available for public access, at least as often as similar historic resources such as the Jack House. She's asked that the project be named after her partner, Mildred Waterman. This project is the Waterman Village. And she's asked for tree preservation. The majority of site trees will be maintained as a part of this project. It's not logical to contend that 100% of site trees have to be maintained to meet this requirement. What about sick trees? About trees that are hazardous and trees that weren't even alive when Ms. Black died in 1989. A park provision, it's an important one. The front 25% of this property and the Adobe will be publicly accessible neighborhood park space. It seems that there's some notion that a park has to be a certain size. This isn't the case at all. There are plenty of other smaller recognized parks here in the city, including Ito and Chang parks. They're much smaller than the front of the area of this Adobe. And historic homes are often designated as parks, even with no outside lands around the structure. These include Boston's National Historic Park and closer to us, Monterey's State Historic Park. Just a few more thoughts with my last minute. What is 100% deed restricted affordable housing but public benefit? I think there's some question here of the project not benefiting the public. This isn't some private developer like in the Palm Springs case trying to build a shopping mall. This is a nonprofit who doesn't benefit from this directly but brings public benefit. Does it benefit the public to leave things as is? Next slide, please. Let's flip through these. I think we saw them. It's some local homes, and this is the state of affairs now. Does it benefit the public not to proceed and to leave this mattress that's been floating around through the backyard for 2 years? Again, we're ready to roll up our sleeves and continue the work with the city and community partners. I respectfully request you deny this appeal based on the facts in the record, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, whoa. I guess I didn't say this in the beginning. I apologize because there are a lot of new people in the room. If you appreciate what someone is saying during a public comment, please use this. If you are unhappy, say this, but we don't do the clapping or the booing in the room. Thank you so much. All right, so with that, do we have any questions at this time? Okay, so now is our time to start the public comment. We are now, no more public comment will be accepted for this topic. We have our 1 minute, 2 minute, and 3 minutes. And would you please share, Ms. Parrington?
Yes, our first speaker is Aaron Pasternak, then Elaine Simmer, and then Leah Brooks. And it would be real helpful if you lined up and were ready to speak when the next person is called. Not done.
Okay. Sorry, I just have to get ready a little bit. Okay.
Dear City Council, dear Madam Mayor, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Aaron Pasternak. I am a fourth year senior regional planning major, and I am also on the ASI board of directors, serving as the member of College of Architecture and Environmental Design. I am here to express support for this project because of the social benefits it brings, and this is especially pertinent because of the housing crisis that we've been in for the past 20 years at least, if not longer. And I believe strongly in the project's merits as well, by bringing public benefit towards the lower income groups of people who desperately need housing close to jobs and resources. And so in general, I express my support, and I hope that it succeeds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elaine Simer, and then Leah Brooks.
Hi there, Elaine Simmer. I live in San Luis Obispo since 1980. I'm also serving on the board of Smart Share Housing. I've been here since 1980, with the exception of 12 years that I spent in Portland, Oregon, being grandma to 2 darling little kids. But now I'm back in San Luis Obispo, and I want to speak not to the legal aspects of this, but just to the practical aspects and my own personal experience. In Portland, I owned a big house with 1/3 of an acre, and I divided the house up into 3 units in order to provide housing for low-income people. I also rented space in my backyard for people who had their own tiny homes. So in effect, I lived in a little mini tiny home community myself, and I can vouch for the people they may have been low income, but they were good, responsible people who took care of their property. And I guess that's my 1 minute is up.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Leah, come on up.
And then Carolyn Huddleston, and Sally Akin.
Hi, good evening. I'm Leah Brooks. I live here in San Luis Obispo. Please deny the appeal. This is a very innovative project that restores a dilapidated adobe and provides affordable housing. To me, this is a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you.
Janine Rands, she'll be our last 1 minute, and then we'll move on to Carol.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Huddleston, and I live in North County, but I used to live in the city of San Luis Obispo for 10 years. And I moved to North County mainly because I couldn't afford to live in the city. I'm on a fixed income. I would love to live in downtown SLO, where I could walk to the farmer's market, I could take the city bus. And I love the idea that it's a community where where we would have a common building, we could meet our neighbors, we could have potlucks and activities. And the fact that it's a historic building, to me, makes it all the more interesting. And the fact that it would breathe new life into that building and have people use it rather than having it sit empty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Janine Rands, San Luis Obispo. I work with homeless, and particularly my heart goes out to the women that are pushing carts around with their belongings because they have no place to call home. We could pride ourselves providing a home and dignity for a woman or a man in this complex. I've toured it with a couple of opportunities to look around, and my heart would be so full of joy that we could be part of a group to provide housing with dignity for women, men, and help them live a significant life with dignity. I would be proud of San Luis Obispo doing that.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sally Aiken, and then Melissa Davis, and then Leslie Halls.
I'm between two hearing aids, so I'll do the best I can. My name is Sally Waterman Aiken. My Aunt Mildred received this property from her father, and she was my great aunt, and I visited this place many times as I was growing up. I was born in 1936, so you know where I am. I believe that this this area of homes is a wonderful idea somewhere else. This is not the area for this particular homeless. Excuse me, I keep saying that. It's not homeless, excuse me, for this area of low income people.
Ma'am, if you want to
this.
address us, that would be
I think
great.
it's marvelous elsewhere. My aunt would be turning over in her grave right now. I'm sorry. My aunt would be turning over in her grave right now if she knew what you were contemplating. I am telling you, this is not what she wishes. I am her great niece. I live in Visalia, California, and I visit her often. I know exactly what she wanted because we talked about it. Mary Gale moved in with her, but she did not, to my knowledge, and I might be incorrect, did not really own this property. And it was talked about between Aunt Mildred and she to give this property to the city for a recreation park area for children to play and for the adobe to be reconstructed for meetings that are appropriate for the city. All right.
Thank you.
Melissa Davis, Leslie Halls, and then Amy Lynn Hildebrand.
And if you could line up either behind the person or to the left or right, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Halls. I'm the president of the San Luis Obispo Property and Business Owners Association and a property owner out in Laguna. I had a prepared speech tonight, but I just want to speak from the heart. It looks like this is really coming down to a battle of lawyers. You guys say one thing, we say another, and they've done a lot of research. Having just heard from one of the heirs, I think it's pretty clear the intent was to make this a park. I was the chair of the Promotional Coordinating Committee back in the 1980s when this project was talked about, that it was going to be a park and it was donated. I remember thinking, this is great. We were tasked with trying to increase tourism at the time, and I thought, this would be a great place to come and visit when you're in San Luis Obispo. It's historic, it's really cool. And the recession hit in 1991, a lot of funding dried up, and I think this just kind of got put on the back burner. In the meantime, the city built a lot of other parks, the skate park for $2 million. They've improved many of the parks with playground equipment, and that's great. I raised 3 kids here. I think it's wonderful. But this fell by the backs, just, got left out. I really don't think this is about low-income housing, quite honestly. I think it's about the city saying, we've messed up for 35 years. This place is a mess. It's going to cost a fortune to fix this adobe, and we don't want to deal with it. I really think it has nothing to do with low-income housing at all. And, in one of the documents that has been thoroughly researched, it says if the city doesn't follow through with this, then the property could revert to the heirs, one of whom we just heard from tonight. If you don't want to develop this the way it was supposed to be as a park, as was promised and repeatedly brought up in the news media, even in New Times, that very conservative paper, that it would be a park, then give it back to the heirs, or else do what you were going to do. I would also point out that with the new administration in Washington, I don't think there's going to be a lot of grant money coming into California for projects like this. Just saying. I think that's a very sketchy thing to lean on, that you're going to get all this money from the feds. They don't like California for some bizarre reason. I don't know. But I really wish that you would either give it back to the heirs or do what you promised to do. And, you know, don't have a big fight from attorneys over what somebody clearly said and what was accepted at the time and for 30 years has been promised as such. I don't think you want to be known as the council that paved over potential parking land to put in high-density housing. I don't think you want to be known as the council for the Tree City that cut down all these big, beautiful trees, well over 100 years old. I just don't think that's being good stewards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Melissa Davis, Amy Lynn Hildebrand, and Bill Holcomb. Holcomb.
Hello, Mayor and Council. This is my first time ever speaking in public, and I'm a slow-grown person. I grew up here. I've seen a lot of changes. Some of them I like, some of them not so much, but time moves on. Not only am I slow-grown, I'm also a social worker. Nothing could touch my heart more than the kind of work that this organization does. I have great respect for them. I wish I could speak more specifically about the good that they do, but this is not the right place for this. And I'm concerned, I'm really concerned about low-income people. I happen to be one. I happen to be a single person who raised a child here in San Luis Obispo. I know they're not allowed to clap. My son and I lived as renters on Dana Street. And when I mentioned to my son yesterday, hey, look, this is going on at the city. He's teaching tonight at Cal Poly and could not come, but he said, oh, Mom, I bet you I know which house that is. And he said, being sharp little guy, he looked up on his thing and said 466. And I looked up and I said, oh, is this it? And on Dave Congleton, I found out that my sharp kid knew exactly what we're talking about. And as long-term city people, I don't think the average person that you guys represent and you guys work for understands all this legalese, but we understand the clear intent of somebody who says park. I love Ito Park. I love, is it Chang Park? They were originally only little tiny things. They didn't take a great big thing and make it little. They were little, they're great, they're assets. Let's make this park more analogous to the Jack House. Let's make it more analogous to a Dana Adobe. That's what we're talking about as regular folk that grew up in San Luis. My son was born here. That's what we're talking about when we say park. We are not talking about a mix of housing that is private with a public park. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about park. You name one in San Luis Obispo that looks like that. I don't see one. We talk park, we mean park. That's what we want. That's what the public wants. And I hope that this council has the courage. Midstream, I recognize how far deep in you are. I'm sorry I wasn't here in November to speak against this. But I am here today to plead with you, to say to you, the public cares about this. I want you guys to be the city council that does what the public expects you to do, what you promised to do, what the other councils promised to do long ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Lynn Hildebrand, Bill Holcomb, and Saro Rizzo.
Amy Lynn Hildebrand?
I am Amy Lynn.
Okay, thank you.
Melissa Davis?
Is Melissa Davis here?
Okay,
Oh, thank you.
so Mr. Holcomb?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm Bill Holcomb. My mother and Miss Waterman and Miss Black were good friends. I remember as a child going down, my family and I going down and having dinner in the Adobe once or twice a year for many years. The Olson family, who rented a house that used to be on the property there, and my family were also good friends. We used to visit them quite often. The 4 Olson kids and the 3 Holcomb kids used to play in that yard. We used to climb those trees. I remember a grape arbor that led from the sidewalk up to the front door of the adobe. There used to be a huge avocado tree on the property. Had delicious, unique flavor to the avocados. I remember the years that there was flooding there, and the flood would go up into the Olson house, at least the first floor. Spent many years and hours of enjoyment in that area. My sister also, years later, rented a room from Miss Black. My mom and Miss Waterman in the 1940s served on some city board that set up a number of parks in the city here. Miss Black and Miss Waterman were really interested in parks, and parks in those days were open areas. I have no idea how you could call something with a bunch of buildings on it a park. Be that as it may, I don't think this is their idea of anything of what they wanted this place to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
After Mr. Rizzo, it's Cara Castro and then Jill Bolster-White.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. My name is Saul Rizzo. First of all, let me say that I am appreciative of the efforts of the applicant here. I've served on the People's Kitchen for many, many years, feeding the homeless, volunteered. I'm also one of probably the first people in this city to bring litigation against the city on behalf of the homeless about 10 years ago successfully, representing many homeless people living in their cars. So my dedication to the homeless and affordability is, I think, beyond questioning. I think this is a good project, but the old saying is we're attempting to put a square peg into a round hole. This project anywhere else would be fine, but not here for very specific legal questions, and that goes to the restrictive aspects of the covenant. I don't want to get too much into legalese. I sent you correspondence this morning, a lot of cases, and probably stuff that the attorneys, but you are very intelligent. I know you have attorneys here, and Whitney's an attorney, and Christine, I call your first name, and we've gone over both sides against each other. Let me just bring it down very quickly. I think the issue here becomes whether or not the request became a restrictive covenant on the grant deed. If it is considered a restrictive covenant, then I think the Wellwood case obviously applies, because the test there is whether the proposed use will directly contribute to the dedicated purpose. Here, obviously, there's no way that allowing this right here would directly contribute to the purpose of a park. The question then goes back to, is this a restrictive covenant? The Supreme Court said, if parties have expressed their intention to limit the use of land, that intention shall be carried out. For the primary object in construing restrictive covenants, as in construing all contracts, shall be effectuate the legitimate desires of the covenant parties. So here, the court says, go beyond the language if you cannot ascertain and look at extrinsic evidence. I think the best evidence here is the council agenda report from 1988. I sent you a copy of it. And it was set up, it was written by the Parks and Recreation. And I think it says, it says the potential for park or recreation use of the property far as outweighed the cost of repair. There's language in here that this could be just like the Jack House. If you look at the resolution adopted, it says, whereas the city of San Luis Obispo is desirous of accepting this grant deed of real property and premises for park and recreational purposes. Basically, they're saying all the documents going back 37 years ago, and that's when you have to go back, clearly shows the intentions were that this was going to be a park for recreational purposes. The other thing is the public policies. The courts point out, why would anybody give anything to the city if they know it could be changed later on? It's against public policy. And it goes back, one who accepts a donation cannot complain about the burden that comes along with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, it's 3 minutes for public comment.
And after Cara, it's Jill Bolster-White, and then our last speaker is John Ashbaugh.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Cara Trapp Castro, and I've lived in San Luis Obispo for nearly 14 years. I first came to this community as a student at Cal Poly, and my family's roots here go back generations. In 1927, my ancestor Mildred Waterman's father purchased the house, the adobe house on Dana Street, and my connection to this land is deeply personal. As a relative of Mildred Waterman, my grandfather's aunt, and her partner, Mary Gail Black, I strongly believe that the Waterman Village project aligns with their wishes for the property. They were strong women who were in support of women, and that is evident by a lot of things that I have read about them. It is well known that the San Luis Obispo faces a severe need for affordable housing. My own son, a full-time employee at Costco, is considered low income, cannot afford to live here on his own, and worries he never will. This is a reality for many in our community, especially older adults on fixed incomes. It is my understanding that retired women make up a large portion of those interested in calling Waterman Village home. The thought of lifelong residents being pushed out due to rising costs is deeply troubling. I've been frustrated by the misinformation circulating in opposition to this project. Language that misrepresents what Waterman Village is, who it will serve, and how it will be utilized. It is disheartening to see some prioritize a few parking spots over the well-being of those in need. Even more concerning are the deceptive tactics used to manufacture opposition, including efforts to manipulate family members into contesting the project. My own mother, Carol Waterman Trapp, initially signed the appeal without fully understanding the facts. After reviewing both sides, she now wholeheartedly supports the projects and regrets her initial opposition and is sorry she couldn't have been here tonight to state that. Waterman Village is a fair, just, and appropriate use of this land. It honors the legacy of my relatives and addresses a pressing community need. I urge the council to support this project because doing so is not just the right thing to do, it's the necessary thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Bolster-White. I'm here representing personally and professionally Transitions Mental Health Association. I am deeply in support of this project. I think it's wonderful. I think I'm also deeply envious because it's such a cool project to be able to restore a building and to add affordable housing in this community. So I may be the only one who has the same kind of experience restoring a dilapidated building and adding affordable housing. I can attest to the fact that it's tremendously effective. It makes a giant positive difference in the area that the project is built. It makes, of course, the bigger difference for the people who get to live there. I'm super excited to support Smart Share Housing in this project. I would be delighted if staff at Transitions Mental Health Association could live there. Many case managers and wellness center folks could probably qualify, income qualify. And 20 units of affordable housing is a pretty big step in our effort to try to build affordable housing. I just want to make sure that we would be happy to step in and do whatever we can to help if there was a problem that Smart Share Housing experienced, but I certainly feel very confident that they'll be able to complete this project and we'll all be excited at the groundbreaking.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I'm sorry, before Mr. Ashbaugh, I had 2 more speaker cards. And then we had one come in just a couple minutes ago, so I don't know if you want to take that or not.
We had closed public comment already, but if it's just one, we can go ahead.
Okay, so after Mr. Ashbaugh, we will have Eric Johansson, Ashley Castino, and then our final speaker is Stu Jenkins. Mr. Ashbaugh?
Happy birthday, Ty. Members of the council and mayor, hi, I'm John Ashbaugh. I also want to make sure, I'm speaking only for myself, but I will say a little bit about myself. Just one thing I know might be helpful. I worked with Jill Bolster-White in transitions on the Bishop Street Studios project, which we opened up just a couple of years after I left the council in 2016. Very proud of that project. I think it might actually provide a kind of a model for what we're doing in this site as well. I was one of the 4 members of the Cultural Heritage Committee that voted for this project. And I went into that hearing with very mixed feelings about it. But I came out of it in strong support of this project, and I would like to continue that support tonight before you. I'm aware of the earlier historical study, and I've talked about it at some length with its author. But one of the things I carried forward from that earlier study was the need to refer to this adobe as the similar Black adobe, honoring Mary Gail Black and who she was. It is significant that your earlier action tonight was to issue a proclamation of Women's History Month. Mary Gail Black was a founder of our county's Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. She was an accomplished journalist and activist. She was nobody's fool, I can tell you that. We became friends, a little bit rocky at first, but we were allies in all those causes that still stir this progressive community of feminists and their allies, of LGBTQ people and their allies, environmentalists and open space advocates, those of limited income. In other words, people just like you and me and most people in this room and in this community. I've spent a fair amount of time walking the grounds of that site, trying to channel the spirit of Mary Gail Black when I knew her almost 50 years ago. It's my strong belief that were she here today, she would be supportive of this project. And I think that she would be appalled by those who are trying to block this project for what in many cases are very selfish reasons. There were 2 items in our approval of this project by the CHC that I think are important, and I want to just mention them very briefly. One, the period of significance for the project, which I learned from the earlier study, should be extended, and I think it is in your documents before you, beyond 1945, to recognize the significant achievements that Mary Gail Black was associated with throughout the post-war period up until her death in 1989. I also want the city to take the steps to honor Mary Gail Black as well as her partner. The front 40 feet of the property or so is proposed, I believe, to be reserved as a park now, with the exception of the parking area. Move the fence back a little bit so that it can be accommodating those magnificent trees and passive park and recreational uses for that portion of the site.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric Johansson, Ashley Gastineau, and Stu Jenkins.
What did I say? That was good. Good breakup. My name's Eric Berg Johansson. I'm a Smart Share board member. I appreciate all of you taking your time to be here tonight. I've been working on this project for years. From the beginning, Smart Share has had the desire to honor the requests of the grant deed. The project proposes community space. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind here, as well as restoration of the adobe. These are 2 very important parts of this project. At the same time, the project accomplishes the important goal of providing additional affordable housing in a town that has become extremely limited in terms of the housing options. If this project does not move forward, there's a lot at risk. If the adobe is not restored soon, I fear it'll be too late to save and we could lose an important historic resource. Second, we could lose an opportunity for something positive to happen on this site. The project will beautify the street, provide public access opportunities, and implement housing options for our community members. The property has been degrading for 37 years, and we're ready for something to happen. I support this project, and I hope that you can help us move it forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ashley Gastineau, and I'm a board member at Smart Share Housing Solutions. The reason that I joined Smart Share Housing Solutions is their dedication, their positivity, and their willingness to make the community a better place and meet immediate community needs. The crux of this meeting tonight comes down to the recreation aspect of the property and to Ms. Black's wishes. There were requests as well as mandates in that initial piece of paper. And we at Smart Share Housing Solution are more than happy to meet both of those things and by creating an amazing park space as well as restoring the historic home known as the Adobe. It makes much more sense to smartly meet the needs of the community by building affordable housing and meeting the requirements of Ms. Blackwell. Smart Share Housing Solutions are going to so many lengths to meet these intersecting needs. Why would we make this property only a park when it would meet community needs and see more use with the affordable housing? We have a property, the community has needs, and the property has needs. And Smart Share Housing Solutions has dedicated people and resources to create a big difference in the community. We can put San Luis Obispo on the map as a place who supports creative, multifaceted solutions. Instead of NIMBYism pushing solutions away, let's welcome positive change. In this situation, let's see how many benefits there are opposed to the concerns. I am very grateful to be a part of this historic community investment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our final speaker.
Mayor Stewart, council members, I'm Stu Jenkins. When I was 15, I got on a group of activists, young people who hung out at a strange place, the Democratic Central Committee. There was Mary Gale Black. As I grew older, I ended up on the Central Committee with Mary Gale Black. And you know, she always wanted you to keep your word. That was very important to her. I got the sense that she had experienced significant betrayal throughout her life, in her career, and in other situations. All these folks working on getting affordable housing are committed to doing a good thing. As you know, I was co-counsel with Mr. Rizzo in the case to defend homeless folks in 2012. So that's very important for us to get affordable housing. But it's also important for us as a city to keep our word when someone gives the city their home, particularly a historic home. And I knew Mary Gale well enough to know that if she gave it to the city expecting it to be used as a public park, preserved as a historic resource and for recreation, that's what she would have expected you to do. Now, having been on a board, I've experienced a situation where decisions have been made and money's been spent and projects have been brought to a certain stage. And so folks tell you when you're in that situation, you've got to vote for this because we've all come so far. If it's a mistake, you have to take the tough decision and say, this is not something that must go forward. We need to cut it off here. We need to do this good thing of building affordable housing on city-owned land, of which there's a lot, somewhere else. That's my thought. I hope you will consider what Mary Gale intended and wanted. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we have the moment where we come back together, and we do have 2 more minutes and 13 seconds, Mr. Barish, if you'd like to add anything to us.
Is this on?
Now it is.
Thank you. You know, I would never have bought this property originally if I wasn't aware that the adjacent property would be turned into a park. A park is a park is a park. It's a four-letter word, and it implies public use. Secondly, I work on commercial leases for a living. I've built several ground-up office buildings. There is no just kidding clause in the city's resolution. In leases, many times they put in a clause that you could rescind it for a specific purpose. There was no such clause in the resolution that was adopted by every senior staff member of the city of San Luis back in 1990. I yield the rest of my time to Mr. Rizzo.
Unfortunately, that's not a possibility. We don't yield time. We can ask questions of you, but that is only of your time. I don't have any right this second, but I'm just letting you know. So we have 1 more minute and 7 seconds in case there's more questions for you, Mr. Barish. Okay, public hearings are one of the most awkward, not smoothly flowing processes because it's very staunch as to 10 minutes here and 10 minutes here and specific questions. So I know that probably doesn't feel smooth and wonderful, but I'm just wanting to let you know that's where the hearing goes and how that works. So now at this point, we've had the applicant presentation, the appellant presentation, the questions of the appellant, the applicant presentation, the questions of the applicant, public comment, and now we have a chance for the council to have deliberations unless you have any other questions of staff. Any other questions of staff? Okay, there's one more, Vice Mayor.
Hi, a couple more, sorry. Just because of some of the things that were said in both of the hearing parties' statements, and maybe the staff can clarify for me, would this come in a lease if we were to move forward with the project, or is it already documented somewhere in the ENA with Smart Shares, a few things? Is there a plan to, with the repair and the renovations of the Adobe, my understanding is that there is a plan to restore the building, but also create a meeting space that would be rented out to members of the community, or I don't know if it's rented, but shared publicly for members of the community. The Adobe is not to be kept as a communal space just for the residents that live there. It's to be a public meeting room with a kitchen, if that's possible. Is that already in the ENA, or would that be part of the lease upcoming?
That's not included specifically in the ENA, but it could be part of a future lease agreement.
Okay. And then are there also conditions in the existing document, or would it need to be part of the ENA about signage that, I know it was in part of the discussion from the previous advisory body meetings, but signage about this being a public park, or the part of it, if it's just the front part of the building, will there be a Waterman Village Park sign that says where the public space is versus where the private space is?
So one of the conditions of approval that was added based on the Cultural Heritage Committee's recommendation is to provide historic signage explaining the historic significance of the site and all the different individuals of importance associated with the site. So that is part of the conditions of approval for the project.
Okay.
Councilman Sharman, that the park piece was not included in the verbiage for signage at this time, just the cultural resources aspect of the project.
Okay, so if we wanted to clarify that further, that this was a public park space, we would need to maybe add something about that in the lease. So is what I'm hearing you say, the cultural aspects would be like informational signage that's kind of spread around the property somewhere explaining the history and the background of the facility, but not necessarily a sign that says Waterman Village Park or something to that effect.
That's right.
Okay.
And I'll just further clarify that the the park aspect or the park setting has not been defined through a condition at this time.
Okay. And then maybe I'm getting too far into the weeds, and if I am, just tell me. But to access the community space once the Adobe is finished, would that be something that if people wanted to use the space, they would contact the city, or they would have to have some other special knowledge through the property of how to access that facility?
That would have to be worked out in the property negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then I think the last question really is about Dana Street in particular, or more generally. And my understanding is that that's like the most of that area is zoned not R1, right? It's R2 or R3. There is some mixed uses along that stretch as well. But are there other, just to kind of understand the character of the rest of the street, there are other multifamily housing type developments there, condos and what have you, is that correct? Okay. I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Yes. Yeah. Okay, Councilmember Marks.
Yeah, I had a question for the city attorney. Sarah Rizzo asked a question during his presentation, which was, paraphrasing here, did the requests become restrictive covenants? And so first of all, I'd like to hear your answer for that. And then also, how would one have made a request a restrictive covenant in a grant deed?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So there is a clear distinction on the face of the document itself between the requests and the restrictive covenant. So there's a clear demonstration, and as Mr. Rizzo noted, both parties were represented by very competent counsel, the city represented by an excellent attorney, city attorney, and then Judge Roger Piquet, who I know for sure knows the distinction between a request and a condition or covenant. And so reflected on the face of the document is that very clear distinction, both in the city's resolution and in the grant deed itself. And then to the second question, how could one have made that request a condition or covenant or a restriction on the use of the property that was enforceable through the grant deed? It would have been to drop that request down to the 6 items or 7 items that were clearly stated on the face of the document as conditions or restrictions.
Thank you for the question. At this point, we move forward to the council deliberation. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you to the Planning Commission, all the members of the Planning Commission, the Cultural Heritage Commission, to our staff. This is very detailed, and this has been a long process already as well, from the Waterman Village and the Peace Project in the past. And I really want to say thank you. I thank you to the family coming out. I know that is a lot to bring yourselves out here and try to recall what happened a long time ago, as well as what you feel at this very point. And I also want to thank SmartShare and the SmartShare board for sharing your details in more detail. When I looked at this entire appeal, I wanted it to be, crystal clear as shared as far as how I would feel about this, and I feel, a little bit mixed, because I want to always, of course, create affordable housing, especially when it comes to low income and very low income. Those are 2 areas which we are really struggling with in this community, and quite honestly throughout California. And I hear the concerns around a park and what people picture a park to be. One of the things, though, when we picture a park, and I look through all of the blueprint of the parks that we have already in the city, there's quite a variety of different types of parks that we have. There's parks with buildings, there's parks with no buildings, but there's not a park so far that has housing. So I see how that's a little different than we have so far. But really, when I come back to it all, I come back to the simple grant deed. And on the top of it, sorry, I had it up a second ago, I said for valuable consideration. And then later on, I go further down by acceptance of this deed. It's 1, 2, 3, etc. And it seems to me that it is, unfortunately, to some probably, very simple that the consideration was different than the requirements. So to me, I think there are some really interesting conversations we're going to have when it gets to the ENA and the leases. I have no question with that. But as far as the Planning Commission appeal, I feel pretty clearly that we should move forward with what the Planning Commission has already determined. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, thank you, ditto to all of the thank yous. A lot of people have put a lot of energy into this already, and it really shows with all of the public comment and all of the community members that are here tonight. And there's a lot of emotion. This is clearly an important, pressing issue to the neighbors, to people who see themselves maybe living in something like this, to people who knew the property owners. I really appreciated some of the personal stories of people sharing their experiences in the Adobe and on that property, and it just warms my heart to think about the potential for generations to come to be able to appreciate this space and the park that will be there. And as I was there touring the facility, I asked the question, so would it be weird if a child and their parent from, that maybe wasn't living there at the Adobe, because presumably these will be individuals living in these tiny home cottages, but if a mom and son from across the street or down the way, brought over a bat and a ball and a couple of mitts and started throwing a ball around in the front grassy area, and they were like, no, that's completely what would be expected. It's a park. It's going to be a park. So I appreciated that, and it created some more warm feelings for me as to how the property would be used. I understand that this would pose a pretty significantly different use than what has been there for a very, very, very long time. And I know that that's hard to get used to for everybody involved, everybody who has used this property in different ways over the years. But some of the uses that are happening there are not great either. And we struggle in some of our park areas, especially that have a lot of wooded areas, with not so savory things happening in them. And this is a way to get eyes on the property, so to speak. And with residents and people living there close by, they'll be able to see if unsavory things are happening at the bases of the trees that might otherwise be hidden away. So I actually see that as a benefit to adding more people and activity and things happening around the park area. I believe that this project does honor, based on the deed and the language and some of the speakers, I believe that it does do the best it can to honor the desires of Ms. Black and Ms. Waterman. It will be a park. A large portion of it will be a park. It's a little bit of a happy medium, right? It gets us the low-income housing that we still so desperately need. We need much more than 20 units, but we have to do this one unit at a time. And so this helps us get us there. And it also creates this wonderful park space that can be used by the entire community. In the meeting room, I think in an old Adobe, it does create kind of a similar vibe, not exactly, because the Jack House is more of a restored to historical context kind of building, but how cool is it that you'd be able to go into this old building, which right now, I went inside, I'm sure many of my fellow council members went inside, and it's pretty bad. And the flooding in that area has not served the structure well. There are massive spider webs. There are soft patches in the floor. It needs a lot of TLC that we as a city clearly haven't been able to give it over the years. And all of the other Adobe projects that we're working on in the city right now are partnerships with, guess what, nonprofits who have the tender loving care and the expertise to do this work and to give it the energy that it deserves. So I think that that part of it is a win-win as well. We would have a hard time restoring this building without the help of a passionate nonprofit. So I think that part of it is a win-win as well. I would like to see, and I don't know if this will be, I guess this will be coming at another time, but I'll just put it out there right now. I would like to see, as we go forward, more clarity around how the public space and the Adobe would be used. I'd love to see a little bit more signage or clarity about the ability to use the park space by all members of the community. And I think those are the two main big pieces that I haven't heard a lot of clarity about that I'd like to see either in a future document or clarified another way. And so I'll just leave it there, but thank you for all the work that's gone into this. And I know that there's a lot of emotion, like I said, and I appreciate everybody being here to share their thoughts. I plan to allow the project to proceed.
Thank you, Councilmember Boswell.
Thank you. Well said by the mayor and the vice mayor. So I'll try to be brief with just a few additional comments. After I first read the item in the agenda packet last week, I wrote a long list of questions, but then I realized all but one of them were essentially questions about the lease ultimately, which I think will be a very interesting and in some ways more critical discussion that we'll have to have in the future. About the project and some of the details about management and things of that nature. So I look forward to that discussion, hopefully, if we move forward tonight. I also realize this is a de novo hearing, so we could jump into the details of the project itself, but I carefully reviewed the comments from the CHC, the Architectural Review Commission, and the Planning Commission, who I want to thank for doing really an excellent job of carefully reviewing the project, making changes when they were deemed necessary, to benefit the project and the community. And in my estimation, they've done a very good job with that. And so I see no reason to go back and revisit the entire issue and instead focus on the issue at hand with the appeal. When looking at an appeal like this, I'm going to first look at, are we meeting what are the basic legal requirements? We've had good information from our legal counsel, from the city on what are our basic legal requirements to meet, and I believe this project does meet those legal requirements. There are questions about broader interest and intent, but after meeting the legal requirements, then I look to the fact that this is a piece of property that the city owns, and it's our responsibility as a city to determine what is the best use of that property for the community as a whole, considering our current situation, our current policy goals and direction, and our current challenges in the city. So those are the two things that I'm weighing. When the city put the RFI out, they asked the community to step forward and help the city, because this was the real challenge, help the city figure out a solution to this property. We obviously had not been successful for many years in figuring out that solution. Smart Share Housing Solutions came forward, community-based nonprofit, who put extensive work with lots of hands involved to come up with a solution that would benefit the greater community and would help the council directly address this challenge we had put out in the RFI. So thank you to Smart Share Housing Solutions for being a community group willing to step up and play a role in solving community problems. Given all of that and weighing all that, I'll be supporting the denial of the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you very much. echo the gratitude from my colleagues for all of the community energy that's gone into this project through the advisory board sessions leading up to this point. You know, it is a real shame that this important historic site has sat empty and underappreciated for so many years. And I'm really grateful to all the community members that came out tonight to share their stories about their relationship to the site, their concerns, and their hopes for this site. As my colleagues have said, tonight's hearing really comes down to a legal interpretation of a grant deed. And on the legal question, the delineation between the request section and the agreement section seems clear. The upper section are requests, while the bottom numbered sections are requirements. And the attorneys who spent 9 months working on this deed were deliberate in that construction of the deed. When Mayor Yale Black gifted the property to the city in 1988, she requested, not required, that the adobe and trees be maintained for a park or recreational purpose. The language of the deed is clear. This was not a binding restriction, but an expression of her preference. But more importantly, to my understanding of the applicant's intentions and our rights as council to ensure that the wish of these requests are listed in the deed are met by the proposed project. The restored adobe itself is intended to be utilized, and hopefully when we get to the opportunity to look through the deed or the lease agreement itself, we ensure that it's utilized as a public park. And the language of the deed is explicit that the request for public access is specific to the building itself, and I hope that we're able to uphold that part of the deed by making it similar to the Jack House, where we have public access and community use. This is a historic site with significant importance to our local history, to LGBTQIA+ history, and one that we really need to make sure that we honor and recognize through signage and through public access. We heard tonight, too, that the history of this site was that there were several smaller units on the property, that there were other homes, that there were several families that shared this place, that people rented rooms inside of the house. And so kind of the spirit of the original use of this house potentially will be carried on. I grew up in an area where historic parks mixed with housing was fairly common. We had a Lamson Farm just up the road. It was an important historic site near my house. It offered space for community gathering. It had open space and trails, but it also had scattered homes that community members lived in and helped take care of. And this project proposes to both preserve the historic adobe and create permanent affordable housing for community members in need. So I believe this project is a legal, practical, thoughtful, and community-driven solution for this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Well, I have to say I really appreciate all of the comments of my colleagues, and I kept crossing off things I was going to say as other people said them. So I do want to say that this this hearing tonight, I really appreciate the way that people care about the community, and it comes out. We care about affordable housing. We care about people losing their homes. We care about parks. But I have to say, as I'll draw on my own experience as an attorney who, for over 20 years, practiced a lot of estate planning, wills and trusts, and like that. I actually have drafted grant deeds. I've worked with donors, and I can tell you that if I were representing the donor in this particular instance, I would have made darn sure that whatever the donor really wanted showed up in the grant deed, wanted to be enforceable, showed up in the grant deed. And the fact that it didn't shows me that the donor wanted to provide the city with some kind of latitude, with some sort of understanding that over time there may be other needs that that arise and other uses. So what the city agreed to in the grant deed is what we're carrying forward. I also want to say that when it comes, this is probably again closer to we want to jump into the details about the operation of the project. But when it comes to designating part of the property as a park, we do have a precedent for that in Laguna Lake Park, which is one part of that property is a park and another part is a natural area. So I could see that it would be possible to work out some kind of a really clear arrangement about what is part of this small tiny home project and what is actually open to the whole public. So I'm going to just stop right there and say that I also will be denying the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your really thoughtful input on this appeal and this hearing. Councilmember Boswell.
I'm going to make a motion. Motion to adopt a draft resolution denying an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision approving the Waterman Village project.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
I'll second that motion.
City Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Boswell.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shoresman.
Yes.
Councilmember Francis.
Yes.
Councilmember Marks.
Yes.
Mayor Stewart.
Before I say yes, so okay, yes, and the motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, and thank you for all who came for this agenda item. City Attorney.
So, Madam Mayor, thank you. I wanted to wait until you were through your discussion and your action, but just for the record, given that there have been some threats of litigation or legal challenge afoot here, the focus of the conversation, because it was the focus of the appeal, I want to point out was very much focused on the park aspect of this, but I do want to just highlight for the record that the language of the deed is precisely that the adobe and 2 adjoining wings that make up the old house and the trees on that property be maintained by the city for park or recreational purposes. So again, I know this is a lawyer thing, but words are important, and it does say park or recreational purposes, not park and recreational purposes. And again, just to highlight for the record, it is very specific to the adobe itself and the trees, even as it relates to that request and that alternative language. So I just want to make that clear in the record.
Thank you. I appreciate that detail. With that, we are going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll see you back just a little before 8. Well, welcome back. Thank you so much. I know you have to present to a quieter group, but we're excited to hear the updates about the ADUs and make sure that we get our ordinance compliant to the state ordinance. I believe that you have a presentation for us to look at in a moment. There we go. All right, Teresa, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much again, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Tonight is an introduction of an ordinance amending Title 16, our subdivision regulations, and Title 17, our zoning regulations of the city's municipal code. As recommended by the Planning Commission, the recommendation for you this evening is to approve an update to the city's subdivision regulations and zoning regulations to implement state legislative updates and regarding ADUs, accessory ADUs, and also including major and minor lot splits. And also we're doing some cleanup amendments for our zoning regulations, in part from discussions with community members about these proposed rules. So what's before you is threefold. We have a group of amendments concerning state laws, state housing laws, especially making it easier to build accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. And these are also in response to a letter received from the State Housing and Community Development Department. We'll also, we're responding to state laws concerning making it easier and ministerial available to subdivide property in both single-family and multifamily zoning districts. And again, making a couple of those changes just to address some input we've received from our community housing partners. And with that, I'll pass it over to David.
Teresa. So the proposed zoning code amendments before the commission tonight are consistent with a variety of policies in the city's housing element. This includes policies that encourage housing production, infill development, and increased density across our housing continuum. The proposed updates to the zoning regulations and the proposed ordinance were noticed as required by local regulations and state law. Additionally, these updates were discussed at the city's developer roundtable meeting for informational purposes and feedback to our developer community. At this meeting, staff received feedback advocating that the city allow short-term rental of ADUs and JADUs. Staff is currently not proposing any changes to the city's regulations, which currently prohibit short-term rentals of these units, which represent a significant portion of the city's rental housing stock, and staff recommends the retention of these units for long-term rentals. The updates to the city's ADU regulations include the following. Most importantly, the updates remove language that allowed only one ADU per property. This requirement was called out by HCD in their letter as being contrary to new state law. The city's update allows for a combination of one detached ADU, one attached JADU, which must be less than 500 square feet, and one ADU created from conversion of an existing or proposed space of a single-family dwelling. The city is required to allow this by state law. The update also expands the zones where ADUs are allowed to any zone that allows residential or mixed-use development. Again, this was identified by HCD as necessary to comply with state law. The city's update also allows for ADUs on properties with multifamily dwellings per the provisions of state law. On any property with an existing multifamily dwelling, the city must allow up to 8 ADUs detached from the main dwelling, provided that they meet the objective setback and development standards included in state law. The amount of ADUs allowed can be no greater than the existing number of multifamily dwelling units. So for an example of a property that has an existing fourplex, the property owner could choose to construct up to 4 ADUs. These ADUs can be attached to each other. The state law just requires that they're detached from the existing structure. In addition to the amendments addressing the new state legislation in HCD's letter, staff has identified miscellaneous ADU items requiring amendments to the city zoning regulations. Staff has proposed an amendment to remove the requirement that ADUs match the primary residence in style, form, and materials. Based on community feedback, these requirements are subjective in nature, can be challenging to implement, especially in the ministerial review process that an ADU necessitates, and it doesn't always result in the best building design. Staff has also identified instances in state law where the conveyance and sale of an ADU separate from the primary residence is allowed. The city's subdivision and zoning regulations currently prohibit this in any instance. This update includes amendments to reference these exceptions in state law. Additionally, staff has updated the ADU regulations to remove the height restriction from ADUs and allow up to a 25-foot height for ADUs. This allows for flexibility in design, and it exceeds the standards that are required by state law regarding height of ADUs. Now we move on to the chapter of urban lot splits. With the passage of Senate Bill 9 in 2021, the city added Chapter 16.15 to its subdivision regulations, incorporating the provisions of the bill into the municipal code. And at its most basic level, this chapter allows a property owner to subdivide a single-family zone lot into 2 new lots that are relatively equal in size, and allows each lot to contain up to 2 residential dwellings. In the intervening time, 3 new pieces of state legislation were passed impacting state law regarding urban lot splits. Senate Bills 450, 684, and 1123 require cities to ministerially approve lot splits on multifamily and vacant single-family zone properties. Staff has proposed a new section of the subdivision regulations incorporating these new laws into the code. So to more easily reference the 2 different types of urban lot splits allowed under state law, staff has proposed the terms minor and major urban lot splits. Urban lot splits for single-family R1 zone properties will be referred to as minor urban lot splits. Urban lot splits for multifamily R2 and above zone properties, in addition to vacant R1 properties per state law, will be referred to as major urban lot splits. Major urban lot splits are allowed in multifamily zone properties. These properties must be less than 5 acres in size and substantially surrounded by urban uses. Major urban lot splits are also allowed in vacant single-family zone properties, but they must be no larger than 1.5 acres in size and must be substantially surrounded by urban uses. A property subject to a major urban lot split may be subdivided to create up to 10 new lots, and the associated housing development project may create up to 10 new dwellings. The number of lots and dwellings are not mutually exclusive. For example, a property can be subdivided to create 5 new lots while still developing 10 new dwellings. However, each lot created through a major urban lot split must contain at least 1 dwelling. Each lot created by a major urban lot split must be no smaller than 600 square feet. If the property being subdivided is a vacant single-family zone property, the lots must be no smaller than 1,200 square feet. The average square footage for all dwellings associated with a major urban lot split shall not exceed 1,750 square feet. And there are a variety of property improvement standards incorporated for major lot splits. These standards require that all lots be served by a recorded access easement or have frontage on the public right-of-way, requiring lot lines to maintain 4-foot setbacks between structures, as well as imposing a parking requirement of 1 space per unit. And per state law, cities are not required to allow ADUs on lots that are created through lot splits. There are several miscellaneous amendments and corrections to the zoning regulations based on HCD and community feedback. Starting off with our urban lot split ordinance, the parking requirement can be waived if there is a car share vehicle located within 1 block of the property. The car share definition has been updated to include clear requirements for what constitutes a car sharing program. Staff has also identified, based on community feedback, a potential barrier to ADUs that involve the addition and/or conversion of existing residential structures to create ADUs. Currently, in order to take advantage of this provision, property owners must first secure a permit to add on additional space, then construct the space and get that permit finalized, then apply for a separate permit to convert that now existing space into an ADU. The zoning code update streamlines this process by allowing for this to be a 1-step process for existing dwellings. Staff also received feedback from our affordable housing developer community regarding the difficulty in providing commercial space within supportive housing projects to satisfy the mixed use requirement in commercial zones. So to provide clarity, staff is adding a note to ensure that supportive housing projects in a commercial zone are not required to be a mixed use development, except for those that are in our downtown core. So the next steps, after council approval of the ordinance, staff will send the ordinance and proposed updates to the state for review and approval. If the state comes back with further desired changes in order to achieve compliance with state law, staff will return to make further changes to the ordinance. Staff is continuing to discuss changes with the community that can further clarify, streamline, and encourage infill housing, and will process future zoning code amendments as appropriate. Staff also plans to release an ADU and lot split handbook. This will succinctly explain to property owners what combinations of ADUs are allowed on a specific property. And additionally, this will explain the city's lot split regulations and the basic standards that must be met for a lot split application to be considered complete. Staff's recommendation tonight is to adopt the draft resolution, which recommends that City Council introduce and adopt the ordinance as recommended by the Planning Commission. That concludes my presentation tonight, and I open the floor to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have probably a silly question, but the car share, the only one I could find was Zipcar. I know we used to do at Cal Poly. I know we used to have the slow regional ride share over by the train. Is there anything else currently in slow that would be a car share?
We're not aware of any other program that would meet that definition, and we were aware of the slow cog program in the past. That was the only one that we were aware of. So.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Councilmember Boswell.
Yeah, thank you. The requirements around city review for ADUs, we're now required to do this ministerially, correct? Is that why the issue of potential design requirements like matching the current house would be very difficult? Because if it's ministerial, right, they have to be objective and prescriptive and...
That's correct. State law really limits the amount of kind of more discretionary or prescriptive standards you're allowed to apply.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I'd asked the question about SB 99 and the evacuation routes for subdivisions that have one way in, one way out configurations. So hold on, I'm trying to get the question back up. Thank you to staff for responding. Really helped clarify things. It does say in your response, though, it says the section, referring to the government code, the section excludes parcels located in the very high fire hazard severity zones. But in our language on the lot splits, both major and minor, it only references high. Well, actually, now I see one references high and very high, and the other only, I think, references very high. So can you clarify?
Are you on page 577?
What's that? Oh, yes, on page 577, and then you can also reference back to the staff response to the question about. So can you clarify, is it high and very high, or does it matter if it's major or minor?
So the way that we've structured this in the ordinance is really to just defer to the state law exemptions, and I believe the state law exemptions are for the very high fire hazard severity zone.
Okay. All right, so you might want to check the minor lot split to see if we've got the language right there. And then, of course, the maps, like in a few weeks, we're getting our new maps, so where this applies to spatially within the city might change a little bit. And I do know probably our most significant SB 99 neighborhood is the San Luis Drive neighborhood. So it'll be interesting to see how, anyway, it's just, I'm not making comments. It'll be interesting to see how that affects that, that neighborhood. One more question, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this in advance. It just occurred to me again, was specific, well, it could be for both really, but the ADU thing triggered the question in my mind, which is clarification on whether these state law requirements for allowing ADUs, but also you can answer it for lot splits. My understanding, these override HOA restrictions. Is that the case or not?
Yes, that's correct. Because it's a state law implementation, that would override HOAs. That's kind of the guidance that we've received. State law doesn't make this very clear, so it's hard to understand, but that's our interpretation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciated your little narrative in there about short-term rentals and kind of the back and forth with the state on that. And I'm just a little bit nervous, and I'm wondering if we have sort of a gut feeling of whether or not they'll support us maintaining some language around prohibitions on short-term rentals in these ADUs.
So state law doesn't make a clear stipulation about the rental term. So our belief is that it allows for us to make that additional imposition. So we would just have to see how HCD really interprets that.
And was there an argument made for why they would want to allow short-term rentals in these ADUs at the state level?
There wasn't really a clear intent as to why.
Okay, thank you for that. And then maybe sort of a wishy-washy question, so there's maybe not an answer for it, but do we have a feeling for what kind of demand might get unlocked by this overhaul of the ADU regulations?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be more opportunities for property owners to achieve density, whether it's through ADUs or lot splits. It really just kind of unlocks opportunities for property owners. I think definitely the multifamily component of this is really critical. There are a lot of underused multifamily properties that may have parking lots or other area that could be, repurposed into additional density through ADUs. So really just unlocking density at a greater level.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, somewhere in all this, there was an indication that under state law, the city is prohibited from taking physical, environmental aspects into account. It's like, okay, what if we, for instance, are in a drought and people want to build ADUs and have water and sewer, but we're in a drought? In a situation like that, or other situations where there are physical requirements, such as I don't know, air quality, all the things that CEQA gets into, besides the city's commitment to live within its natural resources? I mean, is the state requiring us to do something we can't do?
Well, the state's making it certainly harder for local jurisdictions to deny housing projects that meet objective standards. And specifically, new state legislation with specific and adverse impacts. It'll just make it very challenging to deny certain housing projects. That said, I mean, if there was a clear public health safety issue going on in the city, such as water, the city would have other means to be able to address that citywide. So housing project by housing project, it would be very difficult to deny projects that meet objective standards.
Okay, so going back to the HOA question that Councilmember Boswell brought up. So in many HOAs, there's common property that's owned in common by everyone. So what if somebody wanted to build an ADU on the common property? Or, you know, I'm thinking of, or like Los Verdes, I'm thinking of that kind of, we have several developments where there's a lot of terrain that is owned in common. So can an individual condo owner say, I want to build an ADU in my space, even though it might be it might not be actually owned by that person? Yeah.
I thought I've heard every question about how you can build an ADU in this town. That is one we'd have to look into. There is a provision, semi-related, but in state law for multifamily buildings, which can be a condo building, where if there is existing interior space that is not currently used as a dwelling unit, the owners could get together and develop ADUs within the building. So in common space, create ADUs, and the city can't deny those. I have not seen anything that would indicate that, you know, that would happen on condo land, not interior. We'd have to look into that. I have not contemplated that, and we actually haven't gotten that question yet.
Well, so I don't think you should look into it unless you actually get that question from someone in the public. Okay, thank you very much.
Brings me tenant in common questions. Vice Mayor.
Thanks. I'm going to delve a little bit into the car share because that one caught my attention too. So I appreciate that. What I think I hear you all saying is that you're basically revising our ordinances to meet the requirements of what was presented to us by the state in their letter, and just to, in general, make our language more consistent and refer back to state law so that we don't have to sort of make these one-off changes every time some little legal thing gets tweaked by our legislature. So will we just be referring to car share, to the elements of car share in our ordinances, even if we don't have a car? I guess we would have to, if we don't have. Right, but I don't know. I guess I just struggle with how that's practically gonna work in reality. If somebody wants to, I guess they just can't use that exemption or whatever it is. I know I'm using the wrong language, but can't use the car share exemption to put in less parking if there is no car share nearby them.
Correct. And that would be similar also with a major transit stop. There's, the state has many definitions for the things you can use, and some of them don't apply here. And I think what we're going for is clarity. And so everyone's on the same page about, a car share isn't that I have a handshake agreement with the person that lives in the front unit. That's very hard for us to enforce. And so we're looking for what is a clear definition. And hopefully in the future, we have some sort of car share that's developed in the community that we can then, people can rely on.
Yeah, I think it's probably been one of those difficult situations where you it's hard to create a viable business if there's no entities or places that want that. It's a little bit of a chicken or the egg problem, I would think. The other question I had was, I think I know the answer, but just to make sure, we can still have the objective design standards that we have implemented quite a few years ago, correct? It's just the subjective ones that we can't have, which we haven't in a while had those.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Without seeing any further comment, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have one public comment, and that's Emily Ewer.
Sorry, I didn't see you there. I only saw staff. Thank you.
No worries. It's a party one out here. Good evening, City Council. My name is Emily Ewer. I'm a senior planner at Oasis Associates, local land use consultants, and we've been involved in various ADU projects, including multifamily development projects. I spoke at Planning Commission, but also wanted to try my hand here with some thoughts. Wanted to request your consideration to modify Section 1786-20B3C, which is the design standards, as it relates to building height. Currently, the code reads that in order to provide additional design options for accessory dwelling units, units that include creation of new square footage can be constructed up to 25 feet in height if consistent with the setback standards provided in Article 2. So with that, state laws do not impose a maximum height limit for ADU structures. State laws do not impose a limit on number of stories for ADU structures. State law now authorizes multiple ADUs within multifamily development, and the amendment today will allow ADUs in a broad range of zones. Because of this, we wanted to request your consideration for the allowed height of new construction be consistent with the underlying zoning height standards when those underlying zoning setback standards are utilized. This would include upper story step backs as applicable. By relying on the objective standards of the underlying zoning, the development envelope for the ADU and other proposed development would continue to be consistent with the zoning, and relying on that underlying zoning setback and height would allow greater design flexibility for new ADU structures and would be especially meaningful for upper floor ADUs in multifamily and commercial zones. This suggested revision would not change the 16-foot height limitation when utilizing that 4-foot ADU-specific setback standard. While ADUs are the subject of special and focused state-driven legislation, this requested revision is not a super special consideration, but a straightforward application of the city's development standards for a given zone. Right now, this city's regulations currently make provisions for a director's action to make adjustment to the various ADU specific development standards, including height, but this pushes us into an administrative review process, and it's unclear what justifiable findings could be made to deny an ADU structure when it is consistent with those objective zoning standards. It's unclear why that administrative action would be warranted for building heights over 25 feet when they're allowed by the zoning standards. And the only zoning standard that has a 25-foot maximum is the R1. Also regarding Section 1786-20B4C, which was the streamlining process for ADU conversions for existing development additions, our request would be for this provision to be encompass considerations for new construction as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you. And with that, we move into deliberation. Actually, before we move into the deliberation, was there anything specific that you'd like to share, staff, about the public comment before we move any further? Teresa or David?
We are double checking the very high fire language. We might want to make suggest a modification there. And then the request that you just heard, staff's comment is we've heard it, and it is something we'd like to evaluate. Again, ministerial approvals, we would like to discuss this with other departments. We are already going kind of above and beyond the state law allowances on height and the streamlining of a one-step process. So I'd like to mention that as well, but otherwise that staff's recommendation is to revisit those particular issues in the next cycle, which probably will be upon us sooner than we think.
Great, thank you so much for touching base on that. Councilmember Boswell.
I was going to ask that question. So if anybody has other questions, I'll hold off until time for comments.
I think Councilmember Francis does.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the question that the mayor just asked based on our public comment here. I'm hearing that we want to hold off, that the staff would like to hold off until the next round of modifications on these regulations. But something I heard right at the end was, how would we justify doing a higher level of review on those particular projects if the area is already zoned in a particular way? And I guess I don't know enough to be able to answer that question. So I'd love to hear a little bit more detail on how, if a project came through that proposed an ADU that exceeded those height limits but was allowable in that zoning, how would we deal with that, and how would we justify doing a further level of review? Sorry if I didn't articulate that well.
I'll start. David can feel free to jump in. I think, how would we know? I think right now we have a little bit of administrative process to be able to evaluate such a proposal, and that's available now. So we're not creating any barriers to that. It's just we're evaluating projects to be able to go through in a much more streamlined process, both with ADUs and height and whether they're the changes to existing buildings, and now being asked to pre-approve sort of the new ADUs and new structures for multifamily. We'd rather take a measured approach for this, and view sheds, other things that just we're not, comfortable with at this time in terms of just not looking and allowing that to go straight to building permit. So that's our feeling at this point and our recommendation is to let us have a look at it.
And I think Director Tway wants to add to that too.
Yeah, just adding on that, for the particular individual cases, legally we are allowing for actually more than what is required per state law for by right or ministerial review of ADUs, both in multifamily and single family. And so a city can impose a discretionary process if someone is asking for something beyond kind of a by right process. So as long as we approve state, they call them state ADUs, things that comply with state law through a ministerial process, we're hitting our deadlines. The city could have a discretionary process and say, if you want to go above and beyond that, here's the discretionary process. So right now we do have that process. And the public speaker alluded to, you'd have to get a director's action because there could be things particular to that site that may be concerning with the height. To Teresa's point, that's a compelling argument that why not use the underlying height? If you can build a multifamily building to that height, why not some ADUs? And that's something we'd like to just study a little bit more and see what the implications are before we go that far beyond state law. But it is an interesting idea that we will look into.
Yeah, thank you for the additional information on that. I just wanted to ensure that we were aligned with state law and not creating undue hurdles, but thank you.
Thank you. I guess I didn't think I had questions on this, but now I'm coming back to this. I'm sorry. When I saw this come through on email, I thought, well, if we can already have a certain height allowed in a zone, I assume obviously the ADU would be able to come into that zone in that same height in that same zone. But I guess I didn't read that thoroughly enough, because if we can't, what's the concern? Is it about the integrity of the ADU itself being a small building and being tall, or is it about something else? is it about the view shed, or not, sorry, the view into someone else's property? Like, what would it be?
We just really haven't had enough case examples for this. Yeah, that's really what
Thank
will
you.
help us, develop a comfort level. We're, again, already going beyond state law right now by allowing 25 feet. Most jurisdictions, I don't think any in this county are doing that. So we feel like, we're opening those doors, but we just want to take another look at that particular issue.
Thank you. I just couldn't quite get to that one point, so thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember Boswell.
Yeah, just a few comments. Again, thank you to staff for putting this together. I know keeping track of all the state laws, particularly around housing, has become a real challenge, and making sure that we're both staying true to our local principles regarding how we see development occurring, but also meeting these required state laws that we have no choice to meet. We've got to do that. So thank you for figuring out how to make that work for our community. Just a few kind of comments. The height issue is intriguing, but I agree this. I don't think we should make a decision tonight on that. I think we need staff to have some time to look at that. And we probably need to go forward with implementing our current ordinance, which, as stated, is always already a little bit more allowable than the state minimums, and get some experience seeing how these projects are developing out in the community before we maybe consider making them even more permissive than what the state is requiring. I recall years ago the Windermere condos off of Ocean Air. I swear I remember that they took their clubhouse and converted it to a unit of housing to meet some unfunded liabilities in the project. So I don't know. You might look at that and see if it's instructive somehow of how a HOA became a developer in their own property. So there might be a lesson there. I don't know. But it's an intriguing question about what an HOA might be able to do with common property under the new rules. Anyhow, and then the last thing I just want to mention is, and it's related to a question I had asked about kind of some scenarios of how this plays out in the community. I'm very supportive of doing some kind of graphic guide that explains how this works, not just for people who want to do it, but the people who live next door, who are inevitably going to be going, what the heck is going on next door? Because we're going to see that. There are people who are going to be surprised about what their neighbors are able to do, again, under these state mandates that we don't have a choice about. We're required by law to allow them, so we have to allow them. But it is going to create some surprise, particularly in HOAs. I asked the question because I've spoken to a number of folks in HOAs who say, oh, it didn't apply to us, though. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it does. And so I think anything we can do to allow people to better understand what they're either able to do or what might be happening around them is going to be very beneficial. So thank you for considering doing the graphic guide. I very much support us moving forward with that. I'll support a motion, but I'll hold off until other folks have been able to speak.
Thank you. Looks like we have a motion. Do we have more questions? Okay. City Manager, did you have a comment to tie in?
Thank you. Just wanted to jump in, and I think staff was about to do the same thing. We had a chance to take a look at Councilmember Boswell's question, and do think we need to make a quick modification to the ordinance in section B1. I think it's section 5, subsection B1, but I'll let staff clarify, just to make it clear based on the statute, to strike high so that it only refers to very high severity fire. I always get the words mixed up. Very high fire severity zones. Thank you.
B1 and removing the high comma or, and then leaving just only very high fire hazard severity zones.
Thank you for that clarification. Vice Mayor Shorsman.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Boswell, for your comments about finding ways to make this very complicated stuff simpler and more understandable to people, because I had some questions about, so if there's a multifamily unit building and you can add up to 10 or 8 ADUs, and like, what does that actually mean? How many units are there already? And trying to figure out how to do the math in my head. So yeah, this stuff is very legalese, and however we can make it clearer for people. I also just last week had a conversation with a community member who was upset, but not enough, but they said, and I quote, not upset enough to come and speak at a council meeting about it, but about an ADU that had gone into their neighborhood and faced their home and was not what they were expecting and didn't look like anything else in the neighborhood. And I've seen multiple of those go in and have to explain to them that, well, this is state housing law now. So I think there is some, I don't want to say plausible deniability, but it's nice for us to match with state law, because then we can say to community members, look, this is not our doing. This is what we have to do, and we don't really have a choice. Otherwise, we're going to get more letters from the state or worse. So I do appreciate that. That said, I don't know if this would require extra direction to staff, but if you nod no at me, we're already going to do this, then I'll drop it. But I would like us to look into the issue that was brought up in the public comment to try and get clarity around what that might mean, what the impacts would be, and whether or not it's something that we should do. We know we're a pro-housing city, and we want to support ADU development as long as it is safe and not a health and safety risk, and is going to allow more housing to be built. So I think we ought to look at any and all ideas pretty seriously. So if that requires extra direction, I guess I'm looking at the city manager if our motion should require something like that, or if it's kind of a done deal already.
City manager.
Thank you. I believe it's something we will continue to look at and bring, when we know we're going to need to make revisions to the same code again within the next year, I'm sure. And so we'll be able to report back on any of the research or questions that we've received. As an example, I think we'd have to look at things like fire access and making sure that that's being taken into account as well. Once you hit a certain height limit, then we need a different type of apparatus to reach. So all those types of things we'd want to be able to take into consideration when we bring back the next round of revisions that we're going to need to do. So I don't think you needed an emotion, but we appreciate the conversation and direction. I think we're pretty clear that we need to keep looking at that.
Okay, well, I'm happy to support the motion whenever we're ready.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you to Council Members Boswell and Vice Mayor Shoresman for your comments, and I'm in agreement with all of those. Yeah, in particular, I'm very much in favor of high density infill and allowing more ADUs as long as they're not becoming short-term rentals. But I also have had the experience of having friends and neighbors in the community be pretty shocked by what is allowable now. And so the more we can do to communicate and educate, I really like the idea of graphic illustration that we can distribute to folks. I think that would be really helpful. And we'll also, of course, be in favor of making sure that we're in alignment with state laws when it comes time to vote.
Thank you very much. And I think Councilmember Boswell, ready for you.
All right, I'll make a motion approving the draft ordinance as recommended by the Planning Commission, with the amendment striking the high fire hazard severity zone as suggested by staff.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
I will second that motion.
Wonderful. Can we have roll call?
Councilmember Boswell?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shoresman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. I just really thank you for taking this time. You've got to spend a lot of time today in the meeting. But I think as we continue to look at density and how do we make it easier for people to understand that communications and education is going to be so important. So thanks for that. Well, we're ready to move on to the next topic, and that is, again, another state required item. I believe the Human Resources crew is coming in from next door, and we'll be talking about the city workforce vacancies, recruitment, and retention trends because the state has asked us to through Assembly Bill 2561, and we get to have Director Nicole Domini and Jeff, I totally blanked on your title, I apologize. HR Manager, Jeff Andrews, give our presentation. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, as that presentation is getting pulled up, I'm happy to be here tonight. Again, Nicole Domini, Human Resources Director. This presentation, there we go. This presentation satisfies the obligations of the new Assembly Bill that went into effect at the beginning of the calendar year that introduces requirements to report on the status of city vacancies and also recruitment and retention efforts. Tonight, myself and HR Manager Jeff Andrews will be providing a brief overview of the Assembly Bill and walking the council through the city's recruitment and retention efforts. In terms of the recommendation, as included in the staff report, is to approve a policy that outlines the requirements of the law and to receive and file tonight's presentation. So with that, I'll be turning it over to Jeff Andrews to walk through the first portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Nicole, and good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. The background of Assembly Bill 2561 is short and recent. In September 2024, the governor approved AB 2561 with an effective date of January 1st of this year. The bill adds a section to the Myers-Milius-Brown Act, commonly known as the MMBA, which is a state law that governs labor relations between public employers and their employees. As there is a statewide interest in ensuring that public agency operations are appropriately staffed and that high vacancy rates do not undermine public employee labor relations, AB 2561 requires public agencies to present during a public hearing before City Council at least once per fiscal year. The presentation must include the status of vacancies, recruitment and retention efforts, and any necessary changes to recruitment procedures that may lead to obstacles in the hiring process. If annual or multi-year budget adoption occurs during the fiscal year, the presentation shall be made prior to the adoption of the final budget. Additionally, if the number of job vacancies within a single recognized employee organization or bargaining unit meets or exceeds 20% of the total number of authorized positions, there are additional reporting requirements that must be presented if the employee organization makes a request of the city to do so. Our next slide here shows that the city's 6 bargaining groups, none of them were close to the 20% vacancy threshold. The city has 481 budgeted positions across 6 bargaining groups, and 36 of those positions were vacant at the end of calendar year 2024. Vacancies are created when newly budgeted positions are approved, when there is internal movement, such as a promotion or a transfer, or when an employee leaves the organization. The fire group had the highest vacancy rate at the end of 2024 due to service retirements and an employee promoting out of the group. But I'm happy to report that 4 new firefighters started with the city just last week, bringing the vacancy rate down to less than 4%. The city ended 2024 with a 7.5% vacancy rate, and our most recent data shows that at the end of February, just last week, we have 27 vacant positions, or a vacancy rate of about 5.6%. For comparative purposes, last year, the state of California, as an agency, reported that for the past 20 years, their vacancy rate has consistently been above 10%. And as of February 2024, which is the most recent reporting data, the state agency's vacancy rate was more than 20%. On a more local level, my colleagues at the city of Atascadero ended 2024 with a vacancy rate of just over 8%, and the cities of Morro Bay, Pismo Beach, and Santa Barbara were all in the 6 to 7% range. I also understand that we're the first agency in our county to hold an AB 2561 hearing, so it will be interesting to see how this data evolves in the future. In addressing vacancies, staff recognizes recruitment is about identifying, attracting, and hiring the right people, and retention is about keeping employees engaged, satisfied, and committed to the organization long term. We're going to go over the recruitment process and trends, discuss some recruitment challenges, and then dive into retention strategies and additional data points. So a little overview of the recruitment process. When a vacancy is created, the hiring manager submits a recruitment request. HR will open a job posting, screen applications, and collaborate with the hiring manager to conduct interviews and establish an eligibility list. The list allows the city to streamline hiring by maintaining a qualified pool of candidates. Upon selecting a candidate, a conditional job offer is provided. The candidate completes necessary pre-employment procedures such as a background check or a pre-employment physical, and then a start date is determined and a formal offer of employment is signed. Looking back at 2024, there were an average of 39 recruitments per month. Throughout last year, 99 position vacancies were created, 104 job postings were opened, and staff successfully filled 107 vacancies after receiving over 3,000 applications. The median amount of time to fill a regular vacant position was 71 days. And as noted in the city's personnel rules and regulations section of the municipal code, the city strives to fill vacancies by promotion from within. The city's Employee Opportunity Program, or EOP, was developed to enhance employee opportunities for current city employees who desire to promote to other city positions. Internal promotions are a key performance indicator for the HR department, with the goal of filling 40% of vacant positions via EOP. And we're happy to share that in 2024, 43% of vacant positions were filled via internal promotion. So looking at vacancy data for 2024, just under half the vacancies were created due to city employees leaving the organization due to finding a job elsewhere. About 30% of the vacancies were created due to internal promotions, and 15% of vacancies occurred due to retirements or terminations. In addition, City Council authorized just over 10 new positions as part of the supplemental budget in July 2024, creating additional vacancies to fill. The retention rate for 2024 is calculated as the number of employees still employed at the end of the year divided by the number of employees who were employed at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of 2024, the city employed 431 regular employees, and at the end of the year, 80% of those 431 were still employed with the city. This is a new stat for us, so we're excited to see how this trends over the coming years. We'll end the presentation with Nicole talking us through some recruitment and retention challenges and strategies.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. HR staff has reviewed hiring policies, procedures, and different recruitment practices. And while we can always improve, we didn't identify any obstacles that would require policy change. And this slide highlights a handful of different recruitment and retention approaches that the city takes, which I would say is really an individualized approach as it relates to recruitments. Some things that we do as it relates to hiring incentives is if a position is deemed hard to fill, the HR director is able to authorize hiring incentives for those positions. In addition, in the last few years, the council has approved accelerating vacation accrual for new hires. So if an employee starts and they have prior public sector experience, they start at a higher vacation accrual, which allows employees to, I would say, more easily transfer from organization to organization. In addition, we look at different ways that we can recruit if there's harder to fill positions, such as engineers. So in these cases, we do continuous recruitments in order to more frequently look at applicants as they apply, and if they meet minimum qualifications of the job, the department can more quickly interview and extend a job offer. In addition, we have a variety of training and development opportunities. We also provide tuition reimbursement for employees that are interested in pursuing advanced degrees. We offer a variety of trainings to continue investing in our workforce, which is really what helps us to retain our well-qualified employees. We love a committee here at the city, and we have recognition programs that are provided. We nominate employees for Employee of the Year and are able to celebrate our employees throughout. In addition, work-life balance is really important for employees, especially the newer demographics. We offer different work schedules, and one common work schedule is a 980 work schedule, which allows someone to be off maybe one day every 2 weeks. In addition, we are rolling out a formalized telework policy to provide more flexibility for employees that are eligible for that. And then lastly, we strive to be a healthy and smart organization and have a lot of different opportunities for employees, especially on the wellness side. So we provide employee assistance program, preventative mental health services for our first responders, and et cetera. So to wrap up, in terms of key takeaways, especially with our median time to hire of just over 2 months, we aggressively recruit. So we don't hold on recruiting for vacant positions. And I would say where we really focus, aside from getting people onboarded, is to retain them. We know that recruiting is more expensive than retaining our employees, and so we really try to invest in our employees so that they can stay and develop and offer amazing city services to our public. And so just in terms of, again, the recommendation slide, able to answer any questions that the council has regarding the draft resolution that's provided, and also recommending to receive and file the staff report. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the thorough report and also hearing all the things you do to continue to train staff members as well as to promote when appropriate. I know that we are the first in the county to do this report, so I don't know if this question will make any sense, but when I saw the 71 days and a couple other statistics, I just wondered, how did we measure up compared to other local public sector positions or organizations?
Yeah, I would say that it's hard to compare ourselves to really the Central Coast agencies because we are by far one of the largest agencies on the Central Coast. But in talking with colleagues from across the state of California, we are recruiting at a faster rate than the majority of agencies. And especially that time to hire being less than 2 months, or just being slightly over 2 months, I apologize, is pretty, like, give ourselves a pat on the back, is pretty remarkable, especially that we have one recruitment specialist that's dedicated for this purpose.
Thank you. I almost asked about parity communities, but knowing that we have some challenges around affordable housing in our community and pay, that's why I kind of asked the question about local. So thank you. I appreciate that. Vice Mayor?
Thanks. Yeah, just one question that just kind of threw me when I saw the recommendation and the resolution language. Is it a requirement of AB 2561 to approve policies and procedures for this public hearing process, or is it, I see that the resolution is really about adopting the policies and procedures for this hearing rather than just receiving the information from the hearing. This seems more like a receive and file item to me than item with a resolution, and so I just wanted to ask about the reasoning behind what we're doing here
Vice Mayor,
tonight.
you're correct. It's not a requirement to adopt a resolution or policies and procedures, but thought it would be helpful to outline the requirements of the law, just to make it clear and to provide consistency, because it is required on an annual basis.
Okay.
It basically recites what the law requires.
I thought so when I read it, so I was kind of, I get confused by the duplication, but I understand where you're going with it. And just the 71 days does not seem unusual to me in my experience with the county. I'll be curious to see their AB 2561 hearing to see what they report as their average number of days, because that sounds really quick to me. So.
Thank you. Without any other questions, do we have any public comment, City Clerk?
No, we do not.
All right. Can we get a motion for this item? Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, I move to approve the recommendations.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And City Clerk, can we have roll call?
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Boswell?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shorsman?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much, and thank you for the report. We appreciate you doing the work. So, yeah. So next we have item 6D, which is to authorize a PG&E agreement to adopt a government code 4217 findings and issue work order to advance municipal facility energy system retrofits. And I also want to thank you for the agenda correspondence that was helpful, especially in light of more recent battery storage questions. What that looks like for our community. And in fact, when I read this, I thought, oh, wait, what's happening? And really, it's the same as we've had all along, which is how do we make sure we have more battery storage here in our different sites like we would at our homes? So thank you for that. And with that, I will welcome Deputy City Manager Greg Herman and Mr. Bob Hill and Lucia Pullman to provide the report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. We're aiming for a really brief presentation tonight, and I don't want to mess that up. So I'm going to hand it over to Lucia and Bob.
Thank you, and hello, Mayor and City Council members. As Greg shared, this will be a quick item in support of the city's pursuit of streamlined implementation approach for the priority lead by example energy facility retrofits. This item is being presented as a public hearing item tonight in order to make official findings in accordance with Government Code Section 4217. Tonight's item and the proposed resolution would enable the city to take advantage of PG&E's Sustainable Solutions Turnkey program to advance priority lead by example facility retrofits. As a quick reminder on the policy direction behind this council item, the city's primary strategy to reducing emissions in buildings in accordance with its lead by example plan is to proactively electrify a handful of facilities and appliances that use the most natural gas. These facilities are included in the scope of work that would be pursued in PG&E's Sustainable Solutions Turnkey program, which I'll refer to as SST. The SST program utilizes a design-build approach as allowed under Government Code Section 4217, Section .10. Through this program, the city would contract directly with PG&E, who would serve as the city's owner's representative throughout the design-build process with an energy services company. The Utilities Department successfully participated in the SST program in 2012 and 2018 to complete 2 major facility efficiency projects. So thus far, the city has completed the first 2 steps of the SST process. We've completed project initiation, and PG&E has run the procurement process and has selected Willdan as the recommended vendor. Willdan has experience electrifying a public swim facility, which is the most technically challenging and expensive part of the proposed scope of work. Wildan also has a track record of success on prior projects with the city. Tonight's item is a critical milestone in step 3, as we're seeking council's authorization to contract with PG&E and issue a work order for the investment grade audit. And because using this procurement approach under Government Code Section 4217 requires the city to make formal findings at a public hearing, the findings in this draft resolution state that the project and implementation approach is in the best interest of the city, and that the anticipated cost to the public agency will be less than the anticipated marginal cost that would be experienced otherwise. In essence, that means these projects will save the city money. I'll note that if council takes staff recommendation, that next steps would look like completing the investment grade audit in around the fall of 2025 and coming back to City Council shortly thereafter with detailed project information to decide on implementation approach and timing. I'll leave staff's recommendation on the screen and turn it over to City Council for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The only question I had was with Wildan, were there other companies that we had looked at as well, or did an RFQ go out? Sorry, I missed that. I was thinking of a different company I was going to see here when I read the entire staff report, and I thought, so I just thought I'd make sure.
Thank you for your question, Mayor. PG&E runs the procurement process as part of the SST program. When they reached out to their list of qualified energy services company, Wildan, Southland, and Centrica were the 3 firms that responded to the bid, or to the RFP.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I completely missed it at this point.
All good.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, just one briefly. I was trying to understand, so I'm sorry, I'm scrolling to the financial part of the staff report where it describes the $75,000 that is on hand to complete the investment grade audit. And maybe you could clarify for me, that is the cost that we paid to do the audit itself. And then if we go forward with activities that come forward in the audit, then there's additional costs associated with those, and we don't know what those are yet. Am I understanding that correctly?
At the highest level, yes, that is the process. We would initiate an investment grade audit pending council's decision this evening. And upon receipt of that investment grade audit, we would pay out to PG&E the $75,000 for that initial stage. Further participation in the SST program would require council to issue a second work order. That would be an implementation work order for any of the proposed scope of work, and that would be pending council's decision on that future date.
Thank you. And then, but there is a $75,000 grant that we're also eligible that might reimburse us for the $75,000 that we're paying for the audit?
Yeah, it's EECBG is a fraught funding program in these political times. However, some of our peer agencies across the state shared just today that their funding waivers were executed and funds were in their accounts. So we're hopeful, but also not counting on it.
All right, I won't hold my breath, but okay, thank you. Oh, did you want to add something?
It changes every day as far as federal funding goes, but I was going to add that one of the outcomes from the investment grade audit is we'll have really high level construction drawings, like 95% level. So we have estimates that are here in terms of what we think these projects will cost, and through the IGA we'll have really detailed line by line engineers' estimates for what those costs will be. And then some of these items we're anticipating, and so in April and in June, you'll see those in our long-term CIP.
Okay, so we will
Or
have.
for your consideration, that is.
So we will have the IGA completed in time for the next year's financial plan, or are we looking at 2 years down the road?
The investment grade audit would be complete in fall of 2025, and the budgeting process as currently envisioned looks at these items being funded as part of the out years of the CIP.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Oh, do you want to?
And yet still in time to meet our 2030 lead by example target.
Thank you.
It's wonderful news. Without seeing any other comments, any public comment, City Clerk?
No, we do not.
No? Okay. Thank you so much. So with that, I think if there are any deliberation that would like to happen or a motion, Councilmember Francis.
I'm just thrilled by all the work that's gone into this and excited for you guys to move forward on it. So I'm going to move to approve the recommendation.
Great. Thank you so much. Councilmember Marks.
Yes, I'll second it, and thank you for all your detailed work and helping the city get a handle on moving forward in this regard. Thank you. Did I say I'll second it?
I think so, but now you have for sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll have roll call, please.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Boswell?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shorsman?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you for making this so smooth of a process. And with that, we will move on to council liaison reports and communications. Before I get into the reports of each committee, just want to make sure that I highlighted that the city attorney and I both attended the Cal Cities board meeting that was in Rancho Cucamonga 2 weeks ago, I believe, and we haven't had an official meeting since we had the special meeting. So most of that is paid for by the Cal Cities, but we do have a few things paid for by the city budget as well. And SlowCog, we have a meeting tomorrow morning that'll be starting actually a little earlier than normal at 8:30. Don't have the actual address with me right now, but it's at the corner of Marsh and Santa Rosa. We will have, I just went to the California Men's Colony Advisory Committee meeting last Friday. It was one of the first times I've actually been to the California Men's Colony, so that was an interesting experience. Some very old equipment there. But we should hear more about their projects coming up in the next, hopefully the next couple of months. And then the Performing Arts Center Commission, I will just say they are continuing to look at their budget and how do we pay everything, whether it is the city or the university or the nonprofit foundation for the Performing Arts Center. And with that, I will move it on to Vice Mayor Shorsman.
Yes, so thank you. A lot happening last week, just since our last meeting. Some cool stuff. There were a bunch of receptions, actually, last week. The Visit Slow partner reception was last Wednesday at the Quality Suites downtown. I know Councilmember Francis was there as well, and there was a really good presentation that staff put on about the new marketing efforts that they're getting ready to roll out, and a lot of talk about the mid-weekend that we celebrated with the proclamation tonight. And then the following night, more on the tourism front and the downtown front, because there was a delegation of people from Santa Cruz that were here visiting SLO, and they were visiting with downtown SLO and the chamber and city staff, and I think there was some really great exchange of information between folks from Santa Cruz and folks from San Luis. A lot of similarities, a lot of differences also, but similarities between our communities, and bumping right up against neighbors that are universities and things like that. So lots of discussion about what information we can share with each other and what we can learn from each other. And so that was good to get a chance to chat with all of them. And I think that's it for right now.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Well, I went to the wildfire preparedness event that CAL FIRE presented and organized on March 1st. Our fighters were there in force and handing out a lot of information. It was, if you can believe it, I mean, you know, that's a huge space and it was packed. There was a lot of countywide interest in that. And a good portion of the program was comparing what happened in Los Angeles with our own topography and meteorological characteristics, and kind of assuring people that we don't have exactly the same configuration here as they had there. Nonetheless, they had all kinds of good advice, and then each jurisdiction had their own table. So it was a great event. Going on to the Air Pollution Control District, we are in the process of interviewing. I'm the chair this year, and we're in the process of beginning to interview candidates to replace Gary Willey, who's going to be retiring coming up. And also with the Integrated Waste Management Authority, we're also seeking to hire a new executive director. So I'm involved with 2 searches at the same time. I try not to get them mixed up. The IWMA is fully moved into 555 Choro, which is just on the other side of the decorative art underneath the freeway. We don't have a sign up yet there, but it's that's happening. So we're going to be putting the building across the street up for sale, and it will cover the cost of purchasing the new office buildings. There will be a party at some point, open house. Tomorrow I'm attending the County RAC, Water Resources Advisory Committee. We're going to be looking at the hazard mitigation plan, and also get an update on what's happening with state water. The Investment Oversight Committee, I attended that as the alternate this time because Councilmember Francis couldn't make it. We're juggling a lot. It seems like Thursday afternoon's a real popular time, so we're trying to figure it out. The good news is that between September 30th, 2024 and December 31st, 2024, the city's total investments, that's including cash investments, our money market account, the LAIF held accounts, which are an entity pool of investments, mostly treasuries, and then the managed investments altogether increased by about $26 million. So right now, or as of December 31st, it was $244,500,000 dollars. So that's our investments. Now, I just want to say that's not, that money is actively managed when we need it. So it's, some of it's held liquid, some of it's in longer term investments, but basically it always makes me feel secure to know that we do have some backup when we keep making these financial decisions. There is some backup there. And on March 19th, 3CE is having an open house for its new headquarters in San Luis Obispo, right there on Palm Street, 1026 Palm, across from the courthouse. So this is a new model to have regional headquarters besides the one in Monterey. They're going to have chargers in the back, lots of electric chargers, and they're going to be able to have their own media setup, so they won't have to meet in City Hall. They'll be able to meet right there in their own place. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boswell.
Yeah, just one item to report. On February 19th, I attended the Airport Land Use Commission. They had an item relevant to the city of San Luis Obispo on there. We are processing a proposed amendment to the airport area specific plan, basically to bring some zoning changes regarding mixed use. We had made in alignment under the airport area specific plan, so that requires a review, mandatory referral and review by the ALUP. We were represented by John Rickenbach, and it passed unanimously. So good to go with our review from the Airport Land Use Commission.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of fun receptions last week. We also had our regularly scheduled Nacimiento Commission meeting on Thursday. Unfortunately, the city was there, but our partners could not make it, so we did not have quorum. And so we will have a regularly scheduled Nacimiento Commission meeting next week to make up for it on an irregular date. So look forward to reporting out on that when we meet next.
Thank you. And I almost forgot to mention, on Thursday, I got to pick a couple of names for the San Luis Ranch Lottery. So looking forward to who knows how many days from now when we get to find out who gets to have a San Luis Ranch house at affordable housing price. So really exciting for that opportunity. So with that, we are come to the end of our meeting. I will see you all in 2 weeks this time. See you on March 18th, and we will have lots of fun conversations in between. Thank you so much.